Welcome, Victor. Nice to
Well,
meet
it's
you.
great to be here talking to you. I've seen a couple of your videos where you spoke to Liquid Zulu and to President Sunday, both of whom I have spoken to also, and I hope we can have a nice conversation.
Uh, yeah, what did you think about those?
So I didn't really look too deep into them because I wanted to come in with a clear mind, no biases.
Sure.
But from what I heard, I saw that they were quite interesting debates that you had with them, and nice talking points overall.
hmm Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I guess one was more productive than the other. Uh, but yeah. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Victor Magariño. I am an economist, currently a PhD student, and I'm also a high school professor in economics and mathematics. My main interests are in econometrics, classical political economy, and macroeconomics. So that is mostly what I talk about, and that is mostly what I do in a YouTube channel that I have, where I speak about these issues and I look at them from a critical perspective, coming from a heterodox, classical Marxist approach. That is pretty much my background.
I wasn't aware that you are an economist. I always thought that you have a different background. I thought you were working on an MBA.
I did do an MBA, yes. So I have studied a wide range of subjects. I did philosophy also in
Mm-hmm.
university. I have taken psychology courses. That is why I also got the chance to work in behavioral economics at a bank here in Spain for a while. And I have really a wide range of subjects that I have studied and that I have worked on. So yeah, an MBA is one of those things that I have. But my field of expertise, if you want to say it like that, it's economics.
But not like just from the perspective of what you deal with mostly, not from a perspective of what your degree is in, right?
Yeah,
Or
so I have a broad understanding of all subjects in economics and all the schools of economics as well, right? So the training that economists get, especially at top universities, which are the ones that I come from, is usually a neoclassical approach, the one that we study. So we are really experts in everything that is concerning maximization of utilities, models of perfect competition, or some version of imperfect competition. That is really what we are taught. That is what we work with on a daily basis. But I have made the effort to become more knowledgeable on heterodox approaches, on approaches that do not require an analysis of capitalism, that is this perfect system that is maximizing everybody's welfare and that is leading to the best social outcomes, at least in theory, right? So that is something that I have tried to do, move away from this more idealistic notion of capitalism and how markets work. And that is why usually what I do is I work in these more heterodox traditions, right? I have published also a paper on real competition, doing some empirical analysis on profit rate equalization. And I usually try to take this approach, right? A more classical Marxist approach that works with a different conception of the nature of capitalism and of the nature of even human nature itself, right? With even the nature of human interactions in a society.
yeah, yeah. I guess we'll get to that hopefully. So yeah, like one of the I've watched a couple of your debates and a couple of your videos, and I realized like a few things. So firstly, one big question mark, like one thing I think is a little bit of an issue is that I saw that mostly in the debate with Vosh, in the not debate, but in the conversation with Vosh. Uh, he was basically asking you a question, and the question in that sense was, how can I use this labor theory of value to basically own people in a debate, right? Like in a very broad sense, that was what he was asking. And I feel like he asked that question at least 7 or 8 times, and kind of felt like he didn't get an answer. And I also feel like after like the first conversation, you've set a goal in the beginning to basically convince him of your argument. And I feel like you also realized that this goal was not really achieved, even though you didn't have like that big of a disagreement with him. Like it was not like it was a debate and he won or you won or something like that. It was not like that. But I feel like there was some type of miscommunication happening there. And I think that Vosh was, because there was not any form of animosity between the two of you, and because there was like a ideological common ground on which you two were basically basing all of your conversation on. Because of that, he was really open about like saying like this lack of understanding and expressing that lack of understanding and expressing him not being satisfied with where the conversation was going. But I feel like other conversations, similar things have happened, and your conversational partner was not ready to admit that they didn't understand something, or was not ready to stick on one topic pedantically, like to stay on one topic that was not cleared up. And what my goal in this conversation would basically be to overcome these communicational hurdles. Yeah, that's a little bit where I'm coming from. Obviously, I have my disagreements with Marxism in general, and with communism, and with socialism, and that's the second point that I would like to basically talk about now. Is, do you have any? I've heard you state a lot of positive claims, but very few like normative, and I've heard you say very few things about what you want things to be like, and I've not heard you defend concrete policy or a system. So maybe we can start with that. With the first point, I think you can say something to that, and then maybe to the second point you can maybe also comment. That would be great.
Yeah. So let me before answering any of your questions, let me ask you, what is your background and what are your opinions coming into this conversation with me, so that I can get more or less a sense of what you're gonna be arguing.
Yeah, so I guess, okay, but you're still going to answer to the 2 points, right?
Of course I am.
Yeah,
I am.
okay.
I just want to know. I
So
just want to know.
my background is basically in terms of education. You can assume that I don't know anything. Like I know I'm not even remotely as well read on the topics that you're talking about than you are. I've not, in terms of labor time, labor hours, we can say that it's very few labor hours that went into the topics that we're talking about. I have a rudimentary education in philosophy, very base level, years ago. So I have some philosophical education, but really not worth mentioning. And yeah, other than that, like ideologically, I would consider myself a social democrat. I think in the US some might call me a socialist, but I don't. That's not what we call it here in Europe. I don't think that's what people call it in Spain either. So I am in favor of a free market, but I strongly believe in that free market being limited and controlled and directed by a strong government. So, and maybe another side note is that I look very, even though ideologically socialism or communism might not be ethically very far away from where I come from, I still am pretty much heavily opposed to both market socialism and communism, because I think it's, to me, in my understanding, it is completely absurd. It's not viable and not good either. So it is undermining the left, I think, to a very big part, and it's one of the main reasons why I think the left is so weak, in why social democracy is so weak, because I think the ethical argument that both socialists, communists, and social democrats make, which is that we should take care of people, and that it's not like free market economy, and that ethical argument we all share, but in the solution we're so far apart that we're not basically able to get anywhere. And I think that's a big issue, and trying to fight that basically by also arguing with communists and Marxists and socialists.
All right. Well, so to answer your questions, I do think that in the conversation that I had with Bosch, for example, there was probably a failure on my end to communicate effectively the points that I was trying to make. But it was a really nice conversation, and Bosch was open to hearing all of my talking points, and he got to add some interesting points of his own. So I'm happy with how that conversation went. And ever since then, I've been trying to be more focused on delivering the message of what this labor theory of value or what the other theories of the Marxist analytical framework are, and trying to give also the pragmatic use of these theories for political discourse and for economic analysis, right? So economic analysis is obviously what I'm mostly focused on, rather than on political messaging. That is not my powerhouse. But I do think that political messaging is important. So I also try to incorporate as much as I can that perspective, right? The perspective of a person who is trying to communicate a social issue and raise political points with that, right? So yeah, maybe if you want to discuss this very own issue, what is the usefulness of these theories, the labor theory of value in particular, or in general, the perspective that I come from, that is a question that we can tackle, and hopefully I will do a better job this time. And with regards to your point, you made a second point on, yeah, why I'm usually more analytical than prescriptive. That is
Not
because, yeah,
not why,
right.
but rather what is your, like, what would be your prescription?
All
But you
right,
can
all
also
right.
answer the why. Like the why would be interesting as well.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. So to answer first the why, because I think it's gonna be important towards describing the prescription. The why is because before giving a medicine to a patient, you should adequately diagnose their condition, right? And as a socialist, I believe that what we are trying to accomplish is not so much an ideal society that has no flaws whatsoever, but rather a society that goes beyond the one that we currently have, right? Which is capitalism. And in order to prescribe the adequate medicines, we need to first have an adequate understanding of what capitalism is, how it works, and what are its flaws, right? And that is not only why I am, let's say, more analytical than prescriptive, but also that's why my prescription is on trying to, let's say, improve upon those things that we can currently do, rather than just outlining theoretically how a perfect socialist society will work. Now, there are socialist political theorists who do work on this question, and there have been some major improvements on what socialism might look like, what economic planning can look like, whether there should be full economic planning or some kind of a mixture between market and economic planning. But that is, too much of a leap forward from where I stand. Like, where I stand from is we should first try to accomplish the things that we can immediately work on, right? Which is better working conditions, a different political structure that can better address class tensions and that can better, let's say, diminish the negative consequences of the highly competitive market economies that we live in today. And in this sense, I can be considered a social democrat, right? Because let's say democratic socialism, right, is, as you were describing it, it's all about trying to work with what we have, which is market economies, and using tools like the state to soften those things that are not working properly, to make them work better, and to use the state to create some kind of a safety net for workers and for everyone that is not adequately, let's say, their needs are not adequately met in a pure market economy, right? To try to have these people live decent lives. But I do not believe that we should stay there, right? That is why, in the long run, I do believe that moving towards a better society, right, a more socialist society, is probably going to be the answer. Why? Because capitalism itself creates the conditions for everything that the state can do, which is useful and it is appropriate towards maximizing human welfare in these social democrat societies. Capitalism creates the conditions for all of those improvements to be diminished whenever the time comes, whenever there is a need for it, right? And that is why we should understand first how capitalist societies work and why social democracy has its flaws and has its limits, and why we should try to move ultimately beyond capitalism towards a socialist society where the means of productions are not privately owned and so on and so forth. Right. Are these questions satisfactory?
Yes, to a certain
Yeah.
extent, yes, until you said that we have to move beyond, basically, because then my question then is basically that what you just described sounds like you're flirting with the idea of planned economy, and you are also flirting with the idea of market socialism, where there is like cooperatives, but you don't think we are ready. What are the current hurdles to according to you? Why are we not ready for that? Because I don't think we will ever be ready, because I think it's just theoretically not working, but according to you.
Yeah, so right, the thing is that, as I was saying, capitalism is very good at incorporating socialist movements within itself, at improving the condition of the working class, right? And that is something that we have seen throughout the past 100 years or so, right? And there have certainly been a lot of improvements in social welfare and so on and so forth that have been driven by this democratic socialist market economies that we work with today, that are like at the forefront of the developed world. But all right, the market and the profit incentive in particular, right? That's where I think that most of the issues come from capitalist competition and from the profit incentive that is behind all of it. They ultimately create the conditions for all of those things that we have built, right? All of those safety nets that we have built to be diminished, right? Whether very rapidly or in the longer term, slowly, right? Through
No,
maybe, yeah.
I see that there are negatives that come from the
Yeah.
market, and I
Yeah,
see
so
that
ultimately,
it's a power that works against all of these social democratic measures that we're taking. I agree with that 100%, but I still fail to see what your argument would be that would make it possible at some point for us to have market socialism or a planned economy.
right. So what I'm saying is that because, right, there is this limitation within capitalist market economies to achieve the ends of having maximum liberty, maximum fraternity, equality, not just like equity, but equality of opportunities among people, and to have maximum welfare in society. Because these market economies have these limitations towards achieving such an end, we should try to think about a better alternative. And I think, okay, that socialism provides that better alternative. Why?
Wait, when
Because
you say
if,
socialism, sorry, when you say socialism, what do you
yeah,
mean? Do you mean like
yeah, so with
cooperatives?
socialism, I mean, no, so with socialism, I mean a society where the means of production are socialized, right? They are owned by the workers in cooperative styles, but also there is a state that is in control of certain public companies and is also directing, as you can say, the economy towards certain goals that they have planned and they
So
have
part
established.
economy, is there a market?
Yeah, so this is one of the issues, right? Usually the first stages of socialism are market economies, and they try to theoretically, right, what they try to aim for is a point in time where they can fully get rid of the market and become fully planned, as you can say, economies.
And you think that's possible?
Right. So I think that obviously economic planning is possible, right? So I would here make a distinction between the soft problem of economic planning and the hard problem of economic planning. The soft problem of economic planning is, I think, easy to solve in the sense that obviously economic planning can happen. It does happen in practice in the real world, and there are the technological means to do economic planning. Now, the hard problem of economic planning, which is the one that socialist theories have to answer, and they have been trying to answer, is whether these socialist planned, fully planned economies will provide welfare maximizing outcomes, right? Welfare maximizing for the population in general. Now, that is the hard problem. I don't know that there is a full solution to this problem yet, right? Because again, we are working on very highly theoretical, on a very highly theoretical playing field here. But I think that it is a problem that could potentially be solved. But we first need to get the wheel moving, right? And to be
Okay.
able to do this, we first have to move towards more market socialist economy, right?
Okay. So I have like in my head, basically I had a uh very base mapping of this, a very basic map of this conversation. So it has been a little bit changed, obviously, because that was a question that I didn't know the answer to. I would like to talk to you about my issue with plant economies. I would like to
Right.
talk to you as well about my issue with market socialism. But before we do that, before without getting into it, why what interests me at this point more, before we go there, and then I have a couple of more things, and then we can go back there. What it would interest me right now more is what keeps you, what makes you now a social democrat, basically in practice, and what keeps you from asking for market socialism, which is like the step
Mhm.
between full
Yeah.
plant economy.
So what keeps me from I mean asking, right, what keeps me right now from fully advocating for a market economy, for a market socialist economy, is the fact that the conditions haven't been met yet, right? So we have still very strong capitalist economies that are deeply ingrained into the societies that we live in, and that we have yet to see how exactly they can be shifted towards this socialist market framework, right? There have been certainly socialist movements, and there are socialist movements in the present that are trying to make this jump, but they are too weak, right, to make this very important jump.
Can
So right now, I prefer to advocate for things that can, in the short run and in the medium to longer term, improve the conditions of the working class, of marginalized groups, etc., than on having to spend all my time thinking and working towards what right now is a non-achievable society,
Sure.
right?
Do you have an example?
What type of example would you like me to give
I
you?
mean, you've just described, like, basically you said that
Mhm.
there is some things that are still ingrained into our capitalist society that would have to be gone in order for you to advocate for socialism? Would you have an example of what would have
Yeah,
to be
so,
gone?
the first thing is that there needs to be a shift from private property towards socialized property of the means of production, right?
But that would be
And
what
so
you
far,
would be advocating for.
yeah, exactly. That is what we are advocating for. But before the conditions can be there to shift towards a market socialist economy, there first need to be efforts put towards achieving this socialization of the means of production, right? So
No, but
once the means of, yeah.
I'm asking you basically, why are you not asking to shift the ownership of the means of production? And you say that there needs to
Oh
be
yeah, no.
some.
Maybe I misspoke. So I am looking towards that, right? I am looking towards that, but there are other things that maybe are more expedient in the short term that I would like to see first
So you do
happen, right?
advocate for market socialism.
Yeah. So as I was saying, I advocate for it as a intermediary state, that is between what we currently have, right, and what would be a fully planned socialist economy.
Okay, because my understanding before, maybe I misunderstood you completely, because my understanding of what you were saying was that your prescriptive statement is basically social democracy until there is some societal changes, then you would
Yeah.
be advocating for market socialism, which then would be an intermediary step to full planned economy. But that was a misunderstanding. So basically, what you're saying is that you are fully endorsing
Yeah.
market
So
socialism.
let me stop you. Let me. Sorry that I interrupt you,
Mm-hmm.
but
No worries.
so you're almost there. Like there is no contradiction in saying we want better social democracy in the short term, while we, in the meantime, look to build a market socialist economy, right? There's no,
No, there
the
is
two
no.
things are not, I would say that the two things can happen at the same time, right? So that is why I do both things simultaneously, right?
Yeah, I agree. But if I ask you basically for your prescriptive statement, if I would like, if I would ask you like, what do you want society to look like, that's basically the question that I'm asking. And then you're basically saying, yeah, I want social democracy, but what you actually want is socialism. I feel like that's that's kind of
So
like not
let me
not an optimal
summarize it like
answer.
this. Let me summarize it like this. I want us, okay, to improve from the point that we are today with with the capitalist market economies that we inhabit, right? So I want to improve upon that. I want to see society move beyond it because there are some clear limitations of these societies that are not allowing us to achieve this sense of liberty, fraternity, equality, and the maximization of human welfare, right? Now, this happens in a gradual process, right? And I am focused both on short term goals that need to be met and also on medium to longer term goals that I would like to see, right, in such a
Okay.
time span.
I mean, yeah, I agree. That's totally fair. I just feel like if someone asks you like, what is your, like, what do you want for society? I feel like you should just say, in that case, you should just say, I want fully planned, fully planned economy. Like that would be like, to me, that would be the honest answer. Would be, or the more clear answer would be, I want a fully planned economy. Obviously, that's going to take a lot of work. In the short term, I want X, Y, and Z, and I would vote for this party. But I guess like that I guess that's just a communication thing. But
No, but you know, I disagree. I fully disagree
mhm,
with your point here. I don't
mhm,
think that you should say, right, like if you were to ask me when I started university, what is your goal, right? What do you want to see yourself doing? I would say, well, I would like to finish college.
mhm.
But obviously, I had a longer term goal, which was becoming an economics PhD, right? So I wouldn't have said at that particular moment in time, I want to become an economics PhD because it was too far away a reality, right?
Sure.
At that moment in time. So what I said, what I would have said, and what I did say at that moment in time was, I want to focus on what I currently have to do, which is finish my undergrad. And when I started was, finish my midterms and then finish my finals. This is a philosophy that comes also from a soccer coach from the soccer team that I support, Atlético de Madrid, Cholo Simeone, who says, partido a partido, right? Game by game. You have to be playing every game as if it were the last one. And afterwards, you can focus on the next. But you shouldn't be too focused on that. And your goal right now should be, right, if you're playing Getafe, that is your current goal right now. Not the Champions League final, right? Until it comes. Once it comes, then that is your goal.
Okay, then I would like to delay that point. So I would like to then talk to you about the reason why I mean, we can just agree to disagree on that point. I don't think it's really that crucial. The thing is, the thing that I want to hear from you is basically what is your ideal society, and that would be the thing that I would like to talk to you about. So I would like to talk to you about your ideal society, and as far as I understand, we can now say that that's fully planned economy, right?
I mean, obviously, it would be communism, right? It would be a society where there is no state,
not
no
not a
money,
mercantilist society.
exactly. No need for wage labor or enslaved labor of any kind. Right, that would be the perfect society. But that is too far away from the current time for us to be saying
but
this is what
still
we want.
not far away enough for you to be able to want it and imagine it, and for us to be able to talk about if that's even a possible, achievable thing, right?
Yeah, obviously.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that it's probably not too far away for us to not even be able to conceive of it.
Yes.
At least we can have a sense of what the principles behind that society would be, right? Which is, as I was saying, fully socialized ownership of the means of production, no money, no state, some kind of an anarchist society, although I don't like to use that term, but some kind of an anarchist society of that nature. That would be.
I have to, like, I would love to directly go into it, but the thing is that I have one topic that I haven't discussed with any socialist yet and with any communist yet, and I haven't heard also that being discussed a lot. So I have to put that in the middle because I'm scared that if we talk about planned economies right away or the labor theory of value, we will talk about it for so long that this topic is not going to have a place. So I have to put that in between, and then we can go on to the next topics if that's fine for you. So I would like to talk to you about risk. Do you think that risk is I think we all agree that labor is one of the factors that is participating in creating an object or a service or a good, a commodity, right? We all agree that like there is a couple of deterministic factors that come into play, and one of those is definitely labor, then the existing of certain materials, etc. What about risk? Do you yeah.
What is risk to you, right? So let me give you first my perspective of what risk is, since you gave the initial question. So risk from an economics perspective is taking an action whose outcome is uncertain, right? That
And
is
having
where
a
risk.
cost
So
attached.
risk is the, let's say, emergent property from actions that are taken in an uncertain world, right? And because any action in the world that we live in has uncertainty surrounding it, right? Risk is everywhere. It's everywhere. The worker takes risk whenever they get out of bed to go to work. They take a risk whenever they accept a work contract. They They have a risk whenever they decide to take a razor blade to shave, right? We are taking risks all the time, right? So risk is universal. Why do I say this? Because usually the pro-capitalist are, theorists will say that it is the capitalist that is taking on the burden of the risk of the company, and that is why they should be rewarded with all of the profits from that endeavor. And I think that this is a false premise, right? Because risk is universal. Everybody takes risks constantly, and risk is in any action that we take, right? So then a question can arise, which is, okay, but who is taking more
Wait, but
risks?
I
Right?
disagree. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so who is taking more risks? Who is taking actions that are more uncertain? And here, I don't think that there is a universal answer, right? Depends on the company, it depends on the project, it depends on a bunch of things. So it is not possible to make it a law that, by definition, the owner of the means of production, the capitalist, is the one that takes the biggest burden of the risk of any enterprise, right? I don't think that that can be said to be a law. So the argument that the risk that the capitalist takes is the thing that should, okay, prescriptively should guarantee for him the profits from that endeavor, I think that that argument stands on a false premise, which is that premise that universally this happens all the time.
Okay, I haven't yet made that argument, but
Yeah, no, so I don't know what
but
argument you're gonna make. That's why I wanted to ask you next. I
I
just
think
wanted to make my case first.
sure. Like but I guess you would. Okay, I think we, from what you're saying, I think we agree on a couple of things. So I think you agree that risk is something that we have to factor in to our calculation of,
Of course,
right? So
of
that is
any
something
action.
that
Yeah.
of any, so that is something that is a factor in terms of determining the existence of an object or a service or a commodity. So
Uh-huh.
then the other thing that we can do is we can calculate a risk. So we not only have a probability of a certain action giving us the reward that we're expecting, we also have a cost attached to that, right? So
Mhm.
risk always works with two metrics. One is like the probability of that outcome happening, and the other one is the cost that is attached to that action. So in these two terms, I think it's
Mhm.
not a distinction. We don't have to do the distinction between property owner and worker. I think also workers engage in that risk to different levels. So there is
Yeah.
so the moment where I as a worker, I as a software engineer, I take like a course in a certain, I try to develop my skills in a certain area where of which I think that in the future there is going to be need for it, or there is going to be an increase in demand for it. I'm taking a risk, and that risk either rewards me or it punishes me, right? So I wouldn't even make that direct, but we would agree, and I think you would also agree, that if we can prove that the risk for one person is higher than for the other person, that would, that the risk, so basically the expectance value is higher, uh sorry, basically the risk that the person is taking is higher, that would reward that person, that would be make it okay for that person to get more, right? Or is that a concept that you disagree with completely? Like, and right now we're not talking about the difference between employee and worker, we're talking about worker to worker as well. Like, do you think
Uh-huh.
it's okay for me to, I don't know, take the risk of studying for 2 months in a field that is completely new, and me like taking that risk and then fulfilling a certain demand in the future? Do you think
Mhm.
it's okay ethically for me to get more money than my colleague that didn't do that?
Sure, sure. I think that risk taking is certainly a very important ability to have in life. I think that everybody needs to be to some extent a risk taker. We inevitably are, because as I was saying, every time we take an action, we are taking risk, but we need to be good risk takers, right? We need to be good calculators of risk and good calculators of the expected value that we are obtaining from the action that we're taking under uncertainty. Now, I do also agree with you on the fact that risk is something that on a moral level can legitimize differences in earnings, right? I don't have an issue with that. I absolutely think that risk taking is something that is rewarded and that should be rewarded. Not always, right? Not always. Should the gambler that is risking his entire family's earnings, should they be rewarded? Well, I wouldn't say so, right? I wouldn't say that that is something that should happen. Somebody that is at the casino, betting their house or their car, even if they do win, I wouldn't say that this is something to be celebrated. This is something to be said, oh yes, this is morally good, right? Now, nevertheless, if the person is taking risks towards a noble and worthwhile purpose, then the risks should also be rewarded morally, right? So it's not just about the risk; it's also about the what we are aiming for.
Yeah. So
What the thing is, right? So as you were saying in your example, if you are studying on a new field that is trying to develop, I don't know, let's say a cure for cancer, right? And you are engaging in that study where nobody is working on that field yet, and you are developing something new, and you are using resources that you don't know whether the cure is going to be found in your project, but you have, this gut feeling that it will, and you work on it, and you ultimately achieve such a cure. Of course, you should be rewarded, and that is something that any socialist and I would say any person that has some moral intuition would say, yes, that is absolutely justified.
Perfect. So the thing is, we are. Would you also agree that we are perfectly able to calculate a risk to any given statement?
Not necessarily, right? So because uncertainty is so uncertain,
I
right, in
mean,
the sense that there are
we
many,
can.
many
We
yeah, there are
cannot.
many, many variables, and on here. So as an economist, I know very well how probabilistic models of anything really much work. I am aware that there are people whose lives are dedicated towards calculating risks, right? There are these risk analysts that work in banks and work in all kinds of businesses to do these calculations. So I know that they can be done, but I don't want to be too optimistic as to they can always be done on a perfect way,
I'm not
right?
saying. I'm not saying perfect. Like, we're talking about something that is empirical. It's never perfect, but by definition, empiricism is not perfect. But what we're talking about is that we can make an objective. Like, we can make an objective claim that me and you both can agree upon. It's not a. We can use a scientific method to make an objective claim about the risk value of a certain action. And like in
So
that
not
case,
always, as I was saying, because in order to calculate risk, you need to have information and you need to have data about many variables that are involved in that action, and you don't always have complete information. So
okay,
you're not going to be able to. Yeah.
let's take an example. Someone like for in the example of it's a very very easy, and I can just name you two examples, and I think you would agree that we can just make an objective claim on the probabilities there, right? And also on the costs. So you have someone that is working as a software engineer, and then they say, okay, I'm going to take like 2 weeks off right now to take this course, and there's at this moment in time there is X amount of jobs in that field, and I am predicting. I can then make my research. I can make a prediction on based on the stats that I have on how much the increase in jobs is going to be and how likely this increase in jobs is going to be. That's an empirical calculation that we are able to do, right?
Yeah. So
And
I
how
agree
good
that
this, it's not
many
a
times that I agree that many times it can be done. What I'm saying is that you should be careful in saying that it can always be done.
no. Sorry, I have to get a glass of water. 1 second. What I'm saying is it can always be done. It's just that in certain cases the likelihood of the probability of our probability being correct is less, and in other respects sometimes we have more data, sometimes we have less data, but we always have a certain we always have a number that we can produce that is attached to the likelihood of that outcome, which is getting a job with X salary in at time X. We're always able to generate a number that number can be bad, but we can always generate the best approximation of that likelihood, right? That's like as much as we know, like, but we're always able to calculate that number, right?
Okay, so we can always make a guess. If that is what you're trying to say, we can always make a guess.
Yeah, an
What I'm saying
objective
is that
guess.
we cannot always make a good guess.
Yes, but we can always make a guess that is objective, like on which we can agree, right? Like me and you, we can always sit down and agree on that being the best guess, right?
So again, like in order for it to be the best guess, you would need to have a full understanding of all of the guesses, right? So I would also be cautious to say that it is the best guess, because for something to be the best guess, you need to have information about every guess and say, okay, this one is the best out of all of them.
The best guess that me and you can come up with. Like the moment that you would have a better guess, we would both know that that's the better guess. So that's what I mean by objectiveness to that number, right? So me and you, we can basically hash out. Maybe there is a better guess somewhere out there in the world of ideas, right? But me and you, if you present a better guess, we're able to determine both that that's the better guess, that that's the more appropriate number, right?
Okay, let me say, okay, although I'm not fully convinced of your wording, but let me agree with that, because I think that in principle we are certainly agreeing.
Mm-hmm. What's the thing that bothers you?
The wording, it's just the wording that
Okay,
is
how would you
bothering me,
word it?
right? So we can always make a guess, but
Yes.
not always a good guess. We can always make a guess with the level of knowledge that we have, all right? But it's not necessarily the best guess, right? So maybe reality is completely different from what we are guessing.
Yes, there is guesses that are better, that have a higher likelihood of being true, and then there's guesses that are lower. But what I'm talking about is not that. What I'm talking about is that me and you have an objective way of talking about that guess. Like me and you, we are able to talk about, like, if we have two guesses, we can objectively determine which one is the better guess. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so again, like it's going to depend on whether we agree on the nature of the question that we are dealing with, on whether we agree that the explanatory variables are the adequate ones, and there's disagreements everywhere, right? So there is,
assuming that we agree on the facts of the matter,
all
right?
right?
And assuming that assuming that we agree on the facts of the matter, and assuming that we agree on the question. So the question is, for example, we're talking about what's the risk of me taking a 2-week course. Like that's a 2-week course to become a blockchain developer. That's the question that we are asking, right? And then now if we assume that we both know exactly what this question means, and then assuming that we are also we also have the same opinions about the facts of the matter, about the market, how it is, blah blah, all the stats. Basically, we're basically just accepting the Wikipedia stats that we find. We just accept them both. In that case, we can both come up with a number that is where we can determine which guess is better than the other, right? We have an objective guess that we can make.
Yeah. So again, I would just be I would agree with what you're saying, but I would be careful on the wording, and I would be also a little bit skeptical on whether that can truly happen, right? Where we can truly be in full agreement on the facts and on the nature of the question and on all of the variables that are in that particular, you know, action or in
I
that
mean, me
particular
and you,
decision that is being taken.
we could just accept a third party's statements, right? Like in that case, we would be always in perfect agreement. Like if me and you, we just say, okay, you know what, we are settling down, we are sitting down to calculate this number, and you know what, we might have our differences in terms of the world, but we're just going to accept everything that it says on Wikipedia. We're just going to accept that as gospel. In that moment, me and you are in accordance about literally everything, right? We don't have any differing opinions
Yeah.
in terms
Yeah.
of
Again,
the facts of the
under
matter.
that ideal, yeah, under that ideal set of conditions, yes.
Okay. So I believe that in any case when we ask this question, we're able to do that, and you accept that under these certain conditions, that's possible. And I believe that we can also do that for an employee and an employer. And I think that in most cases that the like just let's take a simple example. Me opening a restaurant,
Hmm.
what is the likelihood of that giving me 1,000 euros in the next month? Like that's a question we can calculate, right? That's we can just look at the stats of failed businesses, and then we can go a little bit deeper inside restaurants, and in that quarter, in that area, in that blah blah blah, we can go deeper and deeper and deeper, and we can make a calculation of how likely it is that I'm going to get that wage. And then we can look at a CEO that starts working at my company, at my restaurant, and we can now calculate the probability of that employee getting their wage at the end of the month, in the next month, which is $1,000 as well. Uh, let's say, for the sake of the argument. So wouldn't we just end up with a very different, like in many cases, not in all, but in many cases,
Hmm.
wouldn't we end up with a way lower probability of the restaurant owner getting their $1,000 than the employee?
Yeah. So absolutely, I would say that it is absolutely true that in many cases that would be true. Of course, you would need to also take into account all of the other things that are surrounding that business, right? Whether the working conditions are adequate, whether the equipment is not going to be hurtful towards the worker, right? You need to take into consideration not just the likelihood that the worker will be paid at the end of the month, but also the likelihood that anything else could go wrong, right? Which many things can and ultimately do go wrong in practice. But okay, so let me agree with you. Um, in pure economic terms, right? Purely in the are you going to get your money back? It is absolutely true in many cases that the owner of the means of production, especially in small and medium businesses, is taking a bigger risk, right? And there is no issue. So if the point is that that is why they should be in control of the profits of the company, really there's no issue in me accepting the proposition that there is this risk difference, and that to some extent the differential um, payment that they are going to receive can also be morally justified on that sense, right? Now we need to take a bigger look at the thing, right? We
Wait,
need to
so
take a
just
bigger.
before you go into the bigger look, does that mean that there is no exploitation happening there in
No,
those cases?
absolutely not, absolutely not,
That,
right? this
wait,
is
when you
this is
say
something
no,
that,
do you mean no to my statement, or do you mean no, there is
yes,
no
I mean no
exploitation
to
happening?
your, I mean no to your statement that there is
Okay,
no exploitation in
okay,
that
so
sense,
there is
right?
exploitation happening there.
There could be
No,
exploitation
no, no, no,
happening
no,
there,
no.
of
In
course.
that example that you've like we've constructed a very
Uh-huh.
pure example, and in
So
that
let
pure
me answer.
example,
Let me answer
is
very
there
clear.
exploitation happening?
Let me answer very clearly. If
Mm-hmm.
there is surplus value being created in that company, then
Mm-hmm.
there is exploitation. That's because in the framework that I work with, exploitation is not a moral concept. It is not a, what you can consider morally to be exploitation, as in, somebody being treated unfairly. Exploitation is simply the description of an economic phenomena that is the creation of surplus value, right? Which is the working of more hours that are not socially necessary for the reproduction of the labor force. So if there is a profit being made by that company, right, and that profit is happening under normal conditions, then that is indicative of the creation of surplus value and therefore of the creation of exploitation.
Okay, exploitation
But
then in the sense
I'm
of
not saying that
exploiting a mine.
exploitation, but exactly, but exploitation, I'm not saying that exploitation is morally wrong all the time,
Okay,
right? That's why I'm,
I see.
so
Okay.
if you want to give it a different name, that is why usually, people working in classical Marxist political economy, they usually talk about surplus value, right? And then we use exploitation as a synonym and sometimes as a political messaging tool, right? Which is, look, there is all this exploitation going on in this particular sector, in this particular thing. But if we are talking about the purely descriptive concept of surplus value, then that is happening everywhere where there is
But
a profit being made.
but what I don't understand about that, like this idea of surplus value, like basically creating labor out of thin air, is that a fair description?
No, so it's not creating labor out of thin air. It's working more hours than are socially necessary for the reproduction of the working class, right?
But
So it is creating an economic profit for the
but
owner.
this profit, I feel like this profit, it seems like it is basically arbitrary. But this profit, I think, is the result of the so you are basically saying, so there is an object, right? There is this glass, okay? And in this glass there has been like 10 hours of work being put into this glass, right? And then it is being sold for 12 hours of work.
Not so yeah. So I think
Is
that
that the
that's
idea?
a really common, no, that is a really common misconception, right? The misconception is that the selling price is where exploitation comes from, right? In the classical Marxist approach, exploitation doesn't come from the selling of goods and services, because actually the labor theory of value is built upon the assumption that all goods and services are exchanged at their values, so at what exactly they are worth. So assuming away exploitation in exchange, right? Because we also need to be careful when differentiating exploitation in production, which is the kind of surplus
But
value extraction
wait.
that I'm
It's
working on.
now I'm lost. Now
Okay,
I'm
so
lost.
let me
So
give you then the full argument. Let me give you the full argument. So there is a socially necessary amount of labor time that goes into the production of goods and services, right?
when you say
And
socially necessary, you mean the average time it takes for a good to
yes,
be produced, right?
exactly,
Okay.
exactly, exactly, right?
So 10
And
hours. Let's say 10 hours. On average,
exactly,
a worker takes 10 hours to produce this glass.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So on average, the producer takes 10 hours to produce the glass, right? So the producer will produce a certain amount of glasses that are necessary for them to live, right? For them to live. Let's say maybe it's 100 glasses, right?
Wait, what do
Now
you mean by that?
exploitation, right? So
So
let's say that
do you mean like that
so let's say, yeah, let me give you an example. So let's say, okay, that the worker needs 100 hours of socially necessary labor time in order to uh, have enough money for them to purchase everything that they need to live. All right, in to have a house, to buy food, etc.
Okay.
Now, the worker is not going to work 100 hours of socially necessary labor time. They're going to do maybe 200 hours. And that extra hours that they're working to produce more than what is needed for their reproduction is surplus value, right? That is where surplus value comes from. It's not in the selling price. It's not that it costs you this and you sell it at 12.
Wait, my
So
understanding of surplus value is you produce something and you create a value that is higher than what you put in there. That's my understanding of surplus value.
More value. So you create, so workers produce more
Okay.
than what is needed for their reproduction.
But when you say produce more, you're saying that they're getting more. That's what you're saying, right?
I'm not saying that they get more. I'm saying that they produce more. And who is the one that is getting all of that produce? The owner of the means of production.
No,
right?
but if they get like, if they get enough money, like if you get enough money for 100 hours, but you work 200 hours, you get paid for 200 hours, right?
All right. So this is the thing is that exploitation is also not in the salary, right? It's not in the salary because, as Marx already pointed out, workers get paid their socially necessary labor time that is required for them to reproduce themselves, right? So the wages that workers get, right, in a sense, in this like pure exchange economy with capitalist ownership of the means of production, they are fair in the sense that they get what they are worth, but they produce beyond that because workers are not paid in terms of how much they produce. They are paid in terms of what the market wage for that particular form of labor is.
But when you say beyond that, how do you measure that beyond? That is the profit, right?
Right. So exactly,
But the profit is the price, and that's why I said you produce it in 10 hours, but you sell it for 12 hours.
No, that is not what happens, right?
But
See,
if you say
what
profit,
is,
wait, you cannot speak about profit without talking about price. How would you talk about profit without talking about
so
price?
again, so you need to be very careful here because there is a distinction between monetary categories, which are prices, profits, wages, money, wages. Those are monetary categories. And then there are the value categories, which is the individual labor time that went into producing one unit and the labor time that went into producing the full produce, and then the surplus value that was created. Now, the thing in the theory here is that the monetary categories are ultimately somewhat detached from the value categories, but the underlying,
Victor,
let's say, value of those monetary categories is,
I think, yeah,
in the in the labor time categories, right?
I think
So let me
we are already at
let me
the
see.
no wait 1 second, sorry, because I don't understand. You know, I'm interrupting not because I want to impede you from talking, but it's at a point where I stop understanding, so I have to interrupt because it would be otherwise it would be a waste of time for both of us. So I think right now we're getting into the second part of the conversation, which would be labor theory of value, because the moment where you say there is monetary meaning and then there is the underlying value meaning, I think we're already into the labor theory of value, right?
Yeah,
so
that's why
so it's impossible.
Yeah,
So it's impossible to have this conversation without actually asking the questions of without properly building it up from the ground, and I would really like to do that with you. So but then let's maybe make a cut at this point for a second. Let's stick to the, because I have derailed the conversation basically by asking you about surplus value, by asking you about exploitation, but just let's stick for one moment and then we will go to the labor theory of value. Let's stick for a moment with the ethical. Sorry,
if you would like, let me just make a summarized version of what I was saying so far, right? Maybe it will help you understand, right?
We will
what
get
I'm saying
there.
is that
Yeah.
exploitation is not happening in exchange, it is happening in production, right? So the exploitation doesn't happen when the worker gets paid their monthly salary. It gets done in the process of producing the full produce of the company, where there is a creation of surplus value.
Right? I don't know what surplus value means in your words. I thought I knew what surplus value means, but now basically I see that you have a different understanding of surplus value. We have, for example, in Germany, we have a value added tax is called surplus value tax. It's the same word in our language, like also in the language that Karl Marx wrote in. It is called Mehrwert, so surplus value, and so. But right now, I have no idea why I have no idea what you mean by that right now. So I think we would have to build it up from the ground. What you mean by value, what you mean by like all of these things. But just let's quickly go back to this point. So you think it is justified for differences in pay, for differences in risk taking, right? So you think there should be a reward for risk taking as long as the product of that risk taking, like similarly to I do think that labor should be rewarded, but I don't think like empty labor should be rewarded, right? I think that like if there is a product, coming out of that labor, I think that labor should be rewarded. Similarly, you believe that risk, if the outcome of that is a product which is like useful to society and blah blah blah, then you think that there is a reward. So you do believe that risk should be rewarded. In that sense, we can say that you do believe that the restaurant owner should earn more money than the CEO that is managing the restaurant.
Yeah, so in some instances, yes, maybe not always, but yeah. So let's say, let's see. I don't like to make general rules about this because you can always find examples of restaurants where it is the other way around, right? What I'm saying is that people should be rewarded based on several criteria. First of all, on risk, assuming that the purpose is noble and worthwhile. Also on outcomes, but also on skill, on the abilities that they are able to demonstrate in achieving the end, right? There are many different things that should go into rewarding the person, right? And as a high school professor that I am, I usually reward my students based on a wide range of criteria, based on skill, based on the amount of work that they did in order to get to the solutions in the exam, based on many different things, right? So there's no single thing that determines the worth, let's say, or the amount of reward that somebody should get. Is rather a combination of multiple factors. But yeah, there should be differences in reward in any society.
And
right?
there is no
Because there
objective...
are differences in skill, there are differences in the effort put into working, there are many differences in many things, right?
And then there is a second issue there. The second issue is that we are able to objectively determine who's taking a bigger risk, and we are able to attach a value to that, but we are not able to put the weights on that in an objective manner. So basically, we are not able to say, like, let's say you have put in 10 hours of labor and taken a risk of 3. I just gonna random number, right? And I have put in 10 hours of labor and put in a risk of 4. Like, we don't know now objectively how much more I should get, right? Like, we have no way of... But that's
I don't think that it's necessarily... I don't think that you can necessarily do that. And also, I don't think that is an interesting... So to objectively calculate who should get more. And
but
I don't
no,
even
we can't
think
do that. That's impossible. Like, nature doesn't tell us anything about that. Like, that is literally impossible. Like, that's...
Okay, so we're in agreement there.
Yeah, we're in agreement there. But
and let me continue. What I'm saying is that...
But that opens the door to basically every inequality in wage not having an objective, since there is no objective. Like, even if the employer now gets 10 times the amount that the employee gets, you have no objective basis of saying, now I'm against it. Because you opened the door basically by saying that you are not principally opposed to that inequality. That's why I said, like, in perfect conditions, you are not principally opposed, but then you can't also be principally opposed in them getting 100x times more than the employee, right?
Yeah, of course, of course. I mean, and Marx wasn't against that either, right? I don't know which you will probably have spoken to many naive socialists, but I think that usually socialists are not saying that there is this objective measure of how much everybody should get morally, right? In a pure philosophical sense,
Yeah, I know.
and because the workers are not getting their fair share, then this is the immorality of capitalism, right? I don't think that's where the thing comes from. Now, let me say you this. This doesn't mean that we cannot criticize extreme inequality on other grounds, not on the grounds of maybe it is the worker that should have gotten this amount extra, but on the grounds of the consequences that inequality creates, right? And that is the thing that we criticize. We don't criticize inequality based on what a fair distribution should have been, but rather on the consequences that it does have in society. That is the criticism of extreme inequality. It is not the criticism that there
So
has been,
so it's not
yeah.
wrong for them getting it, it's wrong for them seeing the consequences and then still keeping it. Is that what you're criticizing them, basically?
No, no. What I'm saying is, in general, okay, again, I'm not trying to make moralizing arguments on a specific individuals. Sometimes
No,
these
no.
can be made. But in general, I'm saying in general, inequality is an illness in society, right? It creates tensions, it creates criminality, it creates a bunch of things that we do not want to see in society. And those outcomes are the things that we use to criticize inequality and to say we should probably move towards a society that creates less inequality.
But inequality also creates good things.
Of course, and that is why I'm not saying
So
we
it's not
should
like,
become
it's not
fully
an
equal.
illness.
I'm
Like
saying
I
that we
wouldn't
should
consider
become
it an
less
illness.
unequal.
Sorry?
See, this is I'm not saying that we should become fully equal. I'm
But you
saying
just
that
called
we
it
should
an
become
illness. Like
less unequal.
we should get fully healthy, right? Like if you call it an illness, that seems like you do want to get rid of it. And also if you want a planned economy that is fully communist, that seems like you want inequality to be gone.
I want extreme inequality to be gone, but I want uh, inequality that comes from natural sources that are not of extreme nature. I want those to still remain, right? As I'm saying, I want the person that works more, that is smarter, that is more diligent, that is a better person in general. I want them to be rewarded. But again, like in capitalist societies right now, what we have is not this. What we have is extreme inequality where there are certain classes of people who have much more, not only than what they need, but much more than what is even like justifiable under any moral framework, right? And what I'm saying
I
is
mean,
that this extreme inequality creates bad consequences in society, and we should move towards a more equal society, but not towards a fully equal society, right? Because again, drinking water is good, it's healthy, especially if you are dehydrated. That doesn't mean that you should be drinking water every single second of your life and you drown. All right. See the difference. Like you are maybe
bro, you're making a
you
very
are looking at this from a very binary perspective because the
no,
entire
no,
conversation
no,
has been you moving from like binary distinctions into me trying to defend gradual gradient type of perspectives, right?
no.
What I'm saying is no, we
My
don't want
understanding.
fully equal society.
Okay, my understanding. Okay, maybe I'm making you responsible. Like I'm trying to find that out. Like my understanding is that from people in very left circles in when I was younger. Okay, so when I was like 16, I was a communist, like all of that shit. So I've talked to many people also in private life back in the days when I was still like very very much sympathetic to the movement. And my understanding was that a lot of people do believe that there is a binary, like that there is in principle a worker is exploiting their an employee is an employer is exploiting their employees, not in this neutral sense of exploiting like a mine or something like that, but in an ethically wrong like as something that is ethically wrong. It seems like you disagree with that, and your disagreement comes basically after a certain point of inequality. I think that like that's good that you take that stance. Like I think it's an important stance to take, because I think still in the leftist movement, still a lot of people claim that by definition, basically the landowner or the owner of the business is doing something immoral.
Uh-huh.
It would not be a big stretch to think that you also think that, since you also want to remove ownership from private ownership, since you want to eradicate basically private ownership, I don't think it's a big stretch to think that you would also think that it is immoral. But it seems like now, if I need to steelman your argument is basically it's an engineering problem to a certain extent, where we have inequality. Inequality is the outcome of something that is good, right? So we have the production
not just of something that is good, all right? So not just of something that is good.
I mean, the
also
iPhone is good, right? The iPhone is good, and people want it, and that creates inequality, because that makes Steve Jobs very rich, right?
Yeah, so again, not necessarily from good things, right? Because there's inequality that comes from very terrible things, right? There is inequality that comes from drug dealing. There is inequality that comes from businesses that lie about their product and sell it at prices that are far beyond, right? So there is inequalities coming from both, let's say, ethical and unethical grounds. What I'm saying is that extreme inequality, which in capitalist societies is a combination of these two things, is ultimately wrong, not in a moralistic sense, but in a outcomes-based sense, right? In the sense that it creates definitely outcomes that we do not want to see in society, and we should try to mitigate it, right?
But not inequality. Like when you say inequality does that, that's where my binary alarm sounds go off, because I'm like, when you say inequality is an illness, when you say inequality does X, then you're basically you are basically making the binary claim. What you should say is basically, after a certain threshold, after a certain limit, after that point, we can see that.
No, but I would make the threshold.
We have more negatives.
I said extreme inequality is an illness.
Yeah, that's
but I
what it
didn't say
means.
that all inequality is an illness. Because as I agreed with you on the very beginning of this, there is inequality that is healthy and that is good for you. Just as drinking water is healthy and good for you, but drinking too much isn't.
Great. Okay.
So extreme overhydration is an illness.
Okay.
But some hydration isn't.
And
See
so,
what I mean?
And so your ideal society wouldn't take that away. Like in your ideal society, you
there
would
be
still
inequality,
have,
yeah.
There would still be inequality.
Yeah. So see, one of the first videos that I did in my YouTube channel was a long 2-part discussion on inequality in particular. And I made these arguments like many years ago, right?
Okay. And who would determine what that inequality looks like? Like who does the inequality basically?
So what is healthy inequality? That's what you're asking?
No, I'm asking concretely, like, since right now inequality is being created by the market, right? That's what inequality, like, that's where inequality comes from.
Not just the market, it's capitalism in general, right? It's market and private ownership of the means of production.
Sure, we know where this inequality comes from.
That is a major source of inequality.
Like, we right now, we know where inequality comes from, right? Like, we can point to that, to what's creating the inequality, right?
We can absolutely point.
Yes.
But there are many other things as well, right? There is like corruption.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
But we can point to it, right? And I'm having difficulties, like, if you say that you have a planned economy that is communist, and like, you can describe it the way you want. I don't really yet know how it would look like. And you say that there is inequality. where is this inequality coming from in your planned society?
Yeah, so then my question was fair. I asked you, is your question what is healthy inequality? And
No,
what you just
concretely, like who would, like how would in your economy, how would you determine who has less and who has more? That's what inequality is, right?
again, so it is so I think that you're looking at this as a prescriptive thing, as in there is somebody who is going to make a sentence, this is how much somebody should get, this is how much some
That's
other
what
person
planned
should get.
economy is.
Oh, right. So again, like this is okay. So this is not exactly right. Not exactly. What I'm saying is that inequality, healthy inequality, is going to come from differences in performance. It is going to come from differences in effort exerted. It is going to come from differences in social abilities. It is going to come from many things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is going to arise naturally. It's not going
who,
to
who
be forced
who
through a
decides
system.
who decides which skill is more valuable than the other and by how much in a planned
So
economy?
this is going to be, this is probably going to be a consensus that is going to happen societally, right?
So
It
people
is
are going
not
to
going to
vote
be
on it.
determined by it is not going to be determined by competition in the market in a fully planned economy. It's going to happen through consensus, right? There's going to be societal consensus as to what activities are going to be rewarded more, etc. Right? So I
So
think that this should be a consensus.
so it's going to be voted upon, right? That's what you mean when you say consensus.
Probably it's going to be voted upon, or but not necessarily on formal voting, right? There is certain inequalities that occur naturally, right?
But
In
there
your
is no
household, for
market.
example. Yeah, in your household, for example, in my household at least, there are some people who eat more than others, right? And that is not because somebody said, okay, you're gonna get this, that. It's because some people have more needs than others, fully satisfy their caloric in their caloric needs. Um, Somebody maybe decided to prepare more for that day, so they ate more, and the other person were in agreement that they should get. Like there's like not just like voting. It's sometimes and many times it's informal agreements that happen and that occur naturally, spontaneously.
I don't think that's possible without a market.
Okay, so then you're saying it is not possible for there to be a healthy inequality without a market.
I don't think that we are able to track what's valuable or how much people actually want something or need something without having a market. I think
And how
without
did
a
it happen for the hundreds of years where we didn't have generalized market economies?
I think that as long as you have exchange, that's what I understand by market. Exchange
Yeah,
of
but
goods.
fully generalized exchange economies are a relatively new phenomenon. You
No, fully
understand that for
doesn't need
most
to
of human
doesn't have to be that.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
the
so you
fact that two
understand that
people
for
are able
most
to
of
exchange.
human But you understand that for most of human history, societies have been arranged on contracts that are far beyond the market process, right?
Then maybe
That
we
are
have a different
far
understanding
distinct from it.
of market. My understanding of market is that there is at least two people that are exchanging goods.
Exactly. And for most of
But
society,
that's
there
not
have been
possible.
exchanges, but there haven't been generalized exchanges.
What does that mean? I don't need generalized
Generalized,
exchange.
like
No, I
today,
think no, I don't think that the information is lost. I don't know what generalized means, but it's enough for me to have two people exchange something in order for that information to not be lost. Like I know when I do an exchange, when me and you make an exchange and you give me something, then we have the information of what you have is worth to me, how much I want that, like what I am willing to give up in order for you to give me that object. So in that moment we have a information about the value of that object, and that's enough. I don't need like a generalized market or anything like that. There can be like huge arbitrage opportunities between two continents or between two villages even. That doesn't matter at all for that information. That information is still there. At the moment you don't have any exchange, that information is completely lost. There is no cost attached to me wanting something.
All right. So what I mean by generalized exchange, I mean that everything gets exchanged these days. Markets are everywhere, right? Everything that you see in your room right now, it probably come from a market, right? You have bought it somewhere. It comes from a market exchange. But for most of human uh, history, market exchanges weren't the norm. Most of the things that people had in their rooms and in their houses didn't come from a market exchange. They came from them producing on it, on there being a distribution being done by the landlord, by whoever, right? There are many different ways in which distribution can happen outside of the market. And what I'm saying is that
I know that doesn't matter.
okay,
Like that doesn't matter for my argument. Like, this is like actually pretty famous. That's why I'm so surprised that you're in favor of planned economies, because I'm sure you have read and heard many times about economic calculation problem, right?
mhm.
So
Yeah, so obviously I know, and that is why
and
I'm very
that's
careful when I say, and that is why
yeah.
I'm very careful when I say that I am not yet convinced that there is a solution to the hard problem of socialism, right? Which
But
is whether listen, let me say it again.
sure.
The hard problem of socialism is whether a fully planned economy can happen in a way which maximizes human welfare.
But that's not
And
the
I am
economic
not
calculation problem.
exactly, that is not economic calculation problem, but it is an acknowledgement that because of the economic calculation problem, this issue can arise, right? Because what is the calculation? It is the problem that because the market provides us with information as to the cost of things and how valuable these things are to society at large, individuals can make their own economic plans without needing to ask every single person who had anything to do with the things that they are trying to purchase what the value of that thing is.
No,
They
that's
can
not
just
correct.
look at the price. So okay, so let me fully develop it, right? And in a socialist economy where there are no prices, at least not determined by the market, this information gets lost, right? So economic calculation becomes very difficult and in the
Impossible.
extreme sense
That's where you're wrong.
impossible.
That's where you're wrong. It's not very difficult. It's literally impossible. It's theoretically
All right.
impossible.
So what I'm saying is that it becomes very difficult next to impossible.
No,
That
no,
is
no.
because
That's
depending on no, because depending on the proponent, listen, because depending on the proponent of the economic calculation problem, some will tell you that it makes it very difficult, and some will take the extreme position that it makes it impossible. But
uh,
I am not but I am trying to make the distinction that there are some people who say that because of the economic calculation problem, like Jesus Huerta de Soto, which is one of my advisors for my thesis, there are economists that make the case that it is fully impossible, but there are some that make the case that it is extremely difficult next to impossible, but not
and
fully impossible.
and I also disagree with the ones that say that it is almost impossible. It is not. It's not a. It's by no means a logarithm. It's not by no means a runtime problem. It is actually a theoretical problem. The problem is that the information is lost and you cannot retrieve it. You cannot. You just said something when you said you can get the information of how much someone wants something without having to go and ask the people. The problem is that you cannot meaningfully get an answer to that question because there is no cost attached to answering that question. So if you ask, for example, in a village of 100 people, let's say, and you ask and we say, okay, we want to find out what the demand for a certain object is, and the only way we can do that is basically to ask the people, like, how much do you want that object? Because there is no exchange, because there is no exchange, there is no cost attached to uttering that wish for that object. So you will never get an answer that is actually accurate. You will never get an answer that actually reflects what someone is willing to give up for that object. So in that sense, you're not able to ever find out that one skill is more valuable than the other skill, you will never be able to make that like inequality in your planned economy.
No, I think that we are all the time valuing things, obviously ignoring a opportunity cost, right? As in, you can definitely say how much you want or you do not want something apart from the opportunity cost of that thing, right? It is not necessary for something to have an opportunity cost in us to be able to, or to, so it is not necessary for us to know the opportunity cost of something in order for us to be able to determine how valuable it is, right? And again,
No, that's not
there
true.
are different solutions to this, but the theory behind a fully planned economy, for example, is that we can determine how much, let's say, resources need to be dedicated towards the production of certain things, and those are the costs that we are going to
But
be
you don't know
taking
the
into
value of
consideration.
these resources.
Well, that's because you're assuming that the value of those resources is a subjective thing. And
What do you
I
think it
don't.
is? Do you think that there is an objective value to wood? Do you think that there is an objective value to stone?
So in a full so in an economy that is you know a big economy like the economies that we're working, those things, their value is the amount of labor time that they required to be produced, right? What we need to work in order to get them.
So if you just
Their cost.
work, if you just start working less, it's worth more. Then you also don't believe that it is objective. You
No,
also
obviously
believe
there
that it
needs
is
to be.
subjective.
So again, like, so what I'm saying is there is that this interconnection between the subjective and the objective, and when we are making economic calculation in a socialist fully planned economy, which again, I'm not I'm not saying that this is something that has been solved fully, right? But what I'm saying is that there are solutions that look at this from the perspective of looking at the objective costs of the things that are going to be produced in the economy and using those as the basis to determine the trade-offs that are going to
So
happen.
so just a quick question. So you think that you are able to find out what the value, so you have an object, like you have like two diamonds, okay, and these two diamonds, you found them in the matter of 5 minutes, somebody found them, and then you have like a kilo of stones, and it took them like hours to get them there, to bring them home, and you think it's appropriate to say that the diamonds are less valuable because it took less labor time to do them, to produce them?
No. So again, no. So again, in the labor theory of value, first of all, it is a theory that tries to explain the phenomena of capitalist economy, right? So it is not trying to say what the objective worth of anything outside of the capitalist market economy context
No, we're
is.
trying to find out. No, we're trying. No, we no. We're trying to find it out for your planned economy. Because remember, the reason why we're talking about this is because we're trying to find out how inequality would come up. Like how would we get inequality in your system? That's the
And again, I'm
question we're trying
saying
to answer.
the
But
inequality in
you
my
no,
system.
you're saying that that's in a capitalist system, but we're not talking about a capitalist system right now. We're talking
Exactly.
about
What
your
I'm what
system.
exactly what I'm saying is that inequality in my system will come from differences in skill, from differences in the outcomes of the things that people are working on.
For that you have to determine value, but you're not able to do that because you have an economic
No,
calculation problem.
but because I'm
And
not
then you
trying to
said,
prescribe at the differences. Again, I'm not trying to say who objectively should get more than another. I'm saying that people will naturally get more than
how?
others based on, again, I'm saying based on differences in skill, right?
But
As in, when I'm doing an exam, for example, right, for my students, some will get a better grade because they will have worked more, because some because they are more intelligent, etc. This combination of things creates the inequality in the grades that they receive. But there's no market mediating this inequality.
but
So
you are just,
inequality can
yeah, you
come
are
from
just,
other
you
things.
are the authority on determining the value there.
On determining the grades.
Yeah, that's the
Absolutely.
value. Yeah, exactly. You're putting basically a price tag on their
But
work,
again,
and you are the
it's not
wait,
arbitrary. But it's not
wait.
arbitrary. It
It
is
might
coming
not.
from
No, I'm not saying that it is. I'm not saying that it is completely arbitrary. I'm not saying that. And you've just named an example on how you would do that. Basically, in your planned economy, you said labor time. Wait, you completely are a little bit. I feel like you're a little bit all over the place, because I'm asking you. Inequality, we said inequality is good, right? Inequality is good to a certain extent. We should just not have too much inequality. So I ask you, in your planned economy, is there inequality? You say yes. I say, okay, where is your inequality? If there is inequality, where does it come from? Like, where does this inequality come from? And then you say, from different higher level skills, lower level skills, right? When you say that,
that is one of the
that
things.
is one example, right? That is one example. And then and then I'm asking you, when you say that higher level skill, lower level skill, like I'm asking you, what does that mean? Like, how would you make up a difference between two people if there is no market, right? If there is no way of us valuing the skill of the one and the skill of the other, how are we able to determine which one's more
And
valuable
again,
and which one is getting more?
that is going to happen through a consensus, as I was saying. This is going to happen through that is
Yeah,
a dynamic
and
consensus, right?
I
It's
know
going to happen at a local level, and then it is going to happen at a central level, and there's going to be let's say a communication between the local and the central level that is going to produce the final outcome.
that just means that you basically, let's say you have a village of 100 people, you basically send a letter out to 100 people and ask them, guys, which one do you think is more valuable, this guy or this guy? Whose skill is more valuable? That's the question you would ask, right? That's what consensus means.
I mean, yeah. If you want to put it in a very way, yeah. Let's say that you are going to ask people,
I mean,
okay,
what does
things are
consensus
more
mean?
valuable to you?
What does
But
consensus mean other than that? Like, that's what consensus means. And
because I'm saying that consensus doesn't need to be a formal thing that is like a voting process.
but
It
how
can happen
else?
naturally and spontaneously.
Then give me
I'm
an
saying,
example. Then give me an example of how
but I
it would,
just gave it. I
this
gave it to you at the
consensus.
beginning of this. Listen,
Okay,
okay. So I think this is getting a little bit okay. So first
a
of
little
all,
bit what?
let's take a breather. Let's take a
Okay, okay.
breather because it is getting heated. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's breathe. Let's breathe. Let's take a second. Okay, to process. All right. All right. So your question is, what other way of a
Consensus.
consensus arising can happen other than through a democratic vote?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I gave you an example, as in, who gets to eat what in my household, which it doesn't happen democratically, right? There's no vote on who should get what here, and then we distribute things. All right. It is rather an informal consensus that happens through us, figuring out on our own with our resources how much we're going to need for,
That's the question
in
we're
terms
trying
of
to
food, for
answer.
example. Yeah,
That's the
exactly.
question we're
So
trying
this
to
is something
answer.
that we do, yeah, but we don't do this on a democratic way, as in
So no
this is going
consensus.
to get that and that.
So
So
no
the consensus
consensus.
is, but there is a consensus, right? Because whenever we sit to eat lunch, okay, everybody is getting what they need, everybody's getting what they want, but we didn't vote on it. We just took whatever we wanted, taking into consideration individually the needs of the others, and also being aware of our own needs.
But then you're basically saying something completely different. Now you're saying the inequality comes from the needs being different, right? That's what you're saying. So you're not saying
Because I'm
that.
saying that there, yeah,
Wait,
because
wait.
as I said many times, no, wait, you wait for a second.
But you,
Because
okay.
inequality, as I said many times until now, it is not arising from a single thing. It is
I know,
arising from many things.
I know, but
And I know that you know,
we talk
but
about
now
an
you're
example. We're talking about an
exactly
example, and now you're switching
exactly
the example basically. Now you're switching
no,
to a
because
different example. First we were talking about an example where the inequality was arising from difference in skill. That was the first example that you gave. And then I asked you where this inequality comes from, where it stems from, how it is happening. And then you basically said consensus. And while explaining to me what
but not
consensus
necessarily
is, wait,
consensus.
let me
It is
finish,
also an
please.
outcome.
Let's take a breather. Let me please finish. Uh, while you were explaining to me how the consensus happens other than voting for it democratically, you switched to a different example, which now is needs. Based on needs, there is inequality. And that's a completely different example. That's okay, we can
No, no,
talk
no.
about it, but that's a
No,
different
because
example.
what I'm trying to say, the point that I was trying to make is that consensus can happen without a democratic vote. All right, and then
I still don't know how that would work.
can there be but listen, why can there be differences in skill without a consensus based on outcome? Right, one of my students does the exam and gets all the answers right. The other one does the exam and gets half the answers right. Who is going to get more grade? The one that got all of the answers right.
I
And
have
it
no
is
idea
not
what you're
based
saying
on
right now.
consensus. It is based.
You've
So,
lost
okay.
me. You've
So,
lost me here. So
all
what are
right.
you saying? Are you saying that you're getting the inequality between skill to determine which skill is higher and which is lower? To determine that, are you using consensus
Based on
or are you not?
so what I'm saying, so because I think that you misunderstood, because I never said that the differences is in inequality. So the inequality stemming from differences in skill arises from pure consensus. What I said is that consensus is one of the things that is going to produce this, but outcomes themselves are also going to
Wait,
be
but
producing this
I don't
natural difference.
I don't think that you're able to do it with consensus. That's what my issue with it is. That's why I'm asking you how would you do it with consensus? Like I'm asking you, how would you determine like I'm just asking you, how would you determine the differences in skill? You say consensus. As an example, I'm not saying that you claim that this is the only way. We just sticking to that. I don't think that it's possible at all without a market, but you claim that it is possible, and that therefore, in order to prove to me that it's possible, you have to prove to me at least one case where this is possible, right? That's how logic works. So now we're trying to prove this one case of consensus that you have chosen, right? And now I'm asking you, how would consensus work? Would you basically ask every person, like, would you vote on it democratically? And then you said no, that there is other ways of reaching consensus that is not democratic, and we are stuck there. Basically, I haven't heard from you of a model where you can tell me how this would work, how we would determine the differences in skill, like how would we determine the differences in value of a skill uh, with consensus but without voting. That's what we need right now.
All right, all right. So you want me to answer how differences in payment based on skill can happen without a formal consensus?
Because that's your example. Yeah.
All right, all right. So let me say, for example, you have a soccer team, and there are definitely some soccer players who are better than others, right? They score goals, whatnot, right? So they are able to negotiate a better salary from the employer, right? And the other football players are not asked, "Hey, is this something that you would vote for?" But they are nevertheless in agreement with that. It is an informal consensus that Cristiano Ronaldo in Real Madrid was earning more than other soccer players there, and the others were also happy with whatever they had. And there was an agreement, so the formal agreement. They
but that
didn't vote, okay, this is what we want to happen, right?
but that means that there is one person that is able to decide that completely, like one person with whom they're negotiating. They're not negotiating with the whole team, because and because there is no, like, it's not the voting thing. The voting thing would be to negotiate basically with the whole team, right? They will be negotiating, there will be the voting, but they're just negotiating with one person, right? Like, with who are they negotiating with? They're just negotiating with one
Exactly, and this
person,
is why
right?
I say that there is a
And
difference between
that would
yeah, and this is why I
that
say that there is a difference between the local level and the central, right? So the central level is the one that you are negotiating in this sense, right? Which is like, let's say, the owner of the club. But there's also the local level, and obviously, club to be working properly, everybody needs to be more or less in
so
agreement with what is happening, right?
so in
Everybody
your
needs to be in
system
agreement.
So in your system, there is one
Yeah.
person that ultimately can make any decision that they want, on who
No,
gets
no,
what.
no, no, no.
But
Not
who
any
is then
decision that they
then
want. This
then
is going
who
to
is
be a
the
consensus.
highly skilled?
This is going
Who
to
is
be a
the
consensus
where is
decision.
the consensus happening? If you give the
The consensus is
example,
happening both from democratic voting and from informal consensus. Do
so
you
there
believe
is.
in the existence of informal consensus?
Wait, but I asked you if there is democratic consensus, if there is voting on it, and you said
I'm saying that there's going to be a mixture. I
okay,
said this from the beginning.
okay. That so there is going to be voting.
Yeah,
Plus,
why are you looking at things all the time from a binary perspective, man?
because we live
Like
in a
try to think
reality
a little
where
bit.
logic, where
Try to
you.
think a little bit about these
Oh
things,
my
okay,
god.
as I am explaining them to you. All right, because I think that you are not wanting to understand what I'm saying, right? And this is the problem that I
I
see
feel like you
here.
should be able to
I'm
make one
saying
coherent example, like
because
one,
I'm giving you, yeah, and I just gave you a coherent example,
without
right? Where
any
I said,
logical inconsistencies. Like there should
but
be
there are
very
no
it should
logical
it's a very
inconsistencies.
straightforward question. Like, would you ask people to vote for it? And you say no, we have other forms of consensus.
But I didn't
And now
say
you
no.
say
I
it's a
didn't say
mix.
no. So
Okay, so
I
it's a
didn't say.
mix now.
I
And I
said
want
that,
to.
yeah. But it wasn't. So see, you're always trying to paint me in this way. As in, I said that there's going to be a mixture of things, right? And then I said, yes, some of it is going to be consensus, formal consensus based, and other things are going to be informal consensus. And then you try to put me in a corner of, okay, but this or this or this, and give me an exact. And I just gave you everything that you asked me for,
Okay,
and still you are giving me the crazy look, as in, okay, you're saying things that are logically inconsistent. What
Victor,
thing did I say which is logically
Victor,
inconsistent?
if you like, I have also have a background in mathematics. Okay, so if you have like in first semester you have like logic, base logic, formal logic, right? I'm sure you have also had your fair share of formal logic, right? So if one person says something is impossible and the other person says that it is possible, the way that you basically convince me, you can convince me of uh saying either I have to prove to you that it is impossible because there is a logical inconsistency within that system, or you can just give me one example where this would work and I would be disproven, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Counter
So
examples
and
are
the thing that we're
definitely.
doing right now, I tried mine. I made my case. I said that the information is being lost on we are not able to make a difference between the value of one skill over the other. So I cannot see any way of finding out what basically the difference is in value between one skill and the other that would justify, according to both of us, would justify a difference in outcome, basically, and pay that they get, in distribution, right? And you say that there is. Okay, so I'm challenging that, and I'm saying, okay, then give me one example where this would work, and I'm convinced. And that's what we're trying to do. And I cannot, and therefore I cannot say, when you say, yeah, it will be a mix and there is other forms or there will be some forms of consensus. No, I have to ask you specifically, how would that look like? Because I don't believe it is possible. I already see the problems in the example that you're giving. That's why I'm pedantically asking you to specify how it would work, because I don't believe that it is possible, right? So it's not bad faith from my side. Like, it's not I'm trying to paint you in a certain way. I actually don't believe that it is possible, and I see already the problem that you're running into by giving the example, and that's why I want you to actually give me a concrete implementation of your example. And I think you're not able to give me that, because
Yeah, and I think that you are not able to fully explain what the problem is, because, as I was saying, you can differentiate between skills based on consensus and based on other criteria, as in outcomes, all right, or on a mixture of
but
these different criterion.
when you say you can do that, then just give me one example. Like, just give me
And I give you
one.
multiple, and I give you multiple.
No, you
So
just gave
again,
me the only
let's say,
concrete one you gave me is that you said the football players that negotiate their own salaries, right? And that presumes that there is one person that they're negotiating with, since they're not negotiating with the whole team, right? And then I'm asking, in your system, does that mean that there is one person who can they negotiate with? They could only negotiate with someone that basically holds the whole power, right? Otherwise, why would they negotiate with that person? So therefore, that must presume that in your system there is one person that holds the whole power and that is able to distribute the goods as they want.
No.
Just like in a football
No.
club.
But that exactly, but that is not exactly how it works, because power is multidimensional. Because power is multidimensional, and people can make decisions, but that doesn't mean that they can make whatever decision without facing the consequences of their decision, right? So again, you can give Cristiano Ronaldo, for instance, Cristiano Ronaldo can negotiate, right? And the person that has, let's say, more power than the others over deciding what is going on the club with regards to payment of the football players, that person can give all of the produce of the team to Cristiano Ronaldo. That doesn't mean that they can actually do that in practice, because if they do that, everybody else is going to leave the club and the club will be worthless. So then nobody gets any, right? So underline the decision of this person. There has to be an informal or a formal consensus or a mixture of the two in order for things to happen the way that the person that is making the decision says, right? So when you say that this person has full power, they don't, because everybody has a share of the power there, right? Everybody has a share of the power in that scenario that I gave you, right? Only that one is the person that ultimately makes the division, right? And in this sense, it's going to be happening in the socialist sense. It's going to be happening through a consensus that is going to occur both at a local level and at a central level, and there's going to be a constant communication between the different levels.
I feel like you're saying a lot of general stuff, and I disagree with like all of it, because like first of all, like all of the examples that you're giving are market situations where we know exactly what the outcome is going to be. So we know if a Cristiano Ronaldo, buying Cristiano Ronaldo for X millions of dollars was a bad decision, we will know about it because we don't have the economic calculation problem. Because we get wait. No, wait. You've talked for like 3 minutes. I have to.
Different example.
Sorry, but I have to answer to all of your points. You've made like 10 points.
Sure.
So first of all, you've basically smuggled in an example where we have market conditions and we know basically what a bad decision looks like. We don't have that in your case. And secondly, you're making a lot of general statements, but I'm still waiting for the one example that is where it is working. So I'm asking you, how would the highly skilled labor, how would we decide like one is highly skilled and gets more and the other one is lower skilled and gets less? How would we decide that? And your solution, like the last solution that I heard from you was the person negotiates their salary, and the person that makes the decision can't just do it, but get some negative consequences in the future. So I'm asking you concretely in your system, who would be the person that makes the decision, that decides, right?
Right.
And first of all, who would be that person, and secondly, based on what information would they basically make that decision, because they again are blind to all of the consequences that might arise from that, because they don't know what the value is. Like, based on what would they make their decision, right? Like, how would they decide then what the value of one worker is versus the value of the other worker? Is that fair?
Right. So yeah. So let me give you a different example. Okay, let's completely abstract from money or from market economies. Okay, let's talk. Let's talk about a village, right? In this village, there needs to be a certain produce of. Let's say that these people only apples, right? That's the only thing that they eat. There's only one thing that gets produced in that village, and there is apples, right? Okay. So there is obviously an objective amount of apples that need to be produced in order for the people there to be able to survive and live to produce next apples in the next day, right? That is something that we can calculate objectively, right? The amount of apples. Okay.
Yes.
Now, some apple producers are going to be more skilled than the others, right? They're going to
Mhm.
That is a fact, right?
You're cutting
Some
off a
will
little
be
bit
able.
from time to time, but yeah. I think I understood. Some workers will collect more apples than the others, right? That's what you said.
Yes, they
Yes.
will, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of differences in skill,
Sure.
intelligence, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, the let's say the socialist idea here would be, all right, so everybody gets enough apples, right, from all of the apples that have been produced, in order for them to be content, more or less, with the amount of apples that they have, right? They can live with that amount of apples, and they can be at least informally in agreement that amount of apples that they got. Now, the people who produced more apples obviously are going to need to be incentivized to produce more apples the next day. So they're going to need to get more, right? Not just morally because they did produce more, but also because we want those people to be incentivized to produce more in the next
We
period.
are in complete agreement about that.
All right. So what is going to happen here? There is going to be a central committee, let's say, right, of planners who have calculated the amount of apples that everybody needs, who know exactly the amount of produce that has been produced and how much everybody has produced. Right? They have full information about all of these things, right? And they're going to talk to the people, and they're going to say, okay, individually, right? Let's say they're going to talk to the producers that are more productive and to the ones that are less productive, and they're going to ask them, okay, how many apples do you think are? And the person is going to say, okay, this amount, that amount, etc. They're going to gather all of this information, right? And then they're going to make a decision, an informed decision, taking into account
You're
both.
making your own example way too complicated. You should just say there is an empirical amount of apples that will fill. Like we can know this amount without even asking people. We can know the amount of apples that will be necessary to survive, right?
Yeah, but I'm making it more complicated because I want to show you that there is going to be both an informal consensus and a formal consensus, because there's going to need to be, people need to vote for who is going to be in the committee, who is making, etc. Right? That is the formal part of the consensus. The informal part of the consensus comes from the fact that whenever they see what everybody else got, they're going to need to be content, right? Without needing to vote for that specific outcome in particular, they're going to need to be content with it in order for them to be able to say, okay, I want to produce apples in the next period, right? In order for them to want to be in that village and continue existing there, right? And I also want to show you that there's going to be a feedback, a reciprocal connection between the local level and the central level.
Victor,
This is what I want you to see.
what is
All
the
of the elements.
like? Do you? I feel like uh, this example is the whole issue that we have is that you are losing information on what people want over what. Like you have two objects and you're not able to determine what people want more, that one object or the other. The moment, like that's the value that is basically being, that's the information that is being lost, right? You have lost the comparative value between two different objects. That's the whole problem of the economic calculation problem. The moment you're drawing an example where there is just one product, obviously there is not that problem, right? Like the moment that where you have just one product, there is no information to be lost because there is no exchange. There is no even not even there is not sorry there is not even a comparison between two products. So we don't need that information because there is just one product, right?
I mean, I can make this same example with two products. Do you
Then
want
do
me
it
to
with
do it?
then yes,
Okay,
please go ahead. Do it with two
let's do it with
products.
two products. Let's do it with two
Yes,
products then. Okay, right.
yes,
Let's say that they need to live with apples and pencils. Okay, that's the two things that they need in order to live. You
yes,
have two products, right?
yes.
So the same thing is gonna happen, right? There
Mm-hmm.
are gonna be
Sorry,
some
sorry,
people that.
sorry. One more thing, and then the real issue also only arises after the base needs are met, right? So we have an objective ground on base needs, and everything that goes further than that, that's where you basically run into problems. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So after that, so you're gonna have apples and pencils. There are gonna be some people specializing in apples, some people in pencils, right? And there is going to be more productive workers with their field and less productive naturally because they are more intelligent, more skilled, whatever, because they work. All right. So the same thing is gonna happen, right? You're gonna need to know how much of what the perfect combination is, right? Of pencils and apples that the people need in order to be able to exist, to survive, to be able to produce for the next day, right? And with the surplus product, you're going to have to do this consensus that has both formal and informal components, and that at the same time is going to be negotiated and it's going to be reciprocal and it is going to be dynamic between the local and the central level.
That's exactly what we're interested in, and that's what your example should illustrate. Like, that's, you shouldn't stop there. That's basically where your example should start, because that's the question that I'm asking. Like, the question that I'm asking is, how would you decide what to produce after everyone has their base needs of pencils and apples met? Because we both like say, okay, that's our ethical value that we strive for, right? We have, everybody has their base needs met, and now we have more than that, and now basically we have to decide if we should, with the rest of amount of work that we have, should we produce more pencils or should we produce more apples? And now you have to basically decide that. And
All right,
I'm claiming that you're not able to decide that uh, without a market. You would not know what is better to produce, if people want more apples or if people want more pencils.
so after that, so in the next period, you will recalculate once again how much of each thing everybody needs, and you're gonna make again the same calculation, able which people are working on which things, and how much more productive one is versus the, and the same thing is gonna happen the next time around, right?
No,
So
wait.
yeah,
That's not
it
that's
is
not
going
the
to
interesting
happen.
part. No. That's what we're interested in right now. Let's just assume that it stays constant. Let's say you don't even have to recalculate anything. We just know you have satisfied your need in apples and pencils for everyone. Everyone has enough apples and pencils that is necessary for them to survive, right? We have doctors and they've looked at the size of the stomachs of people, and that's it. So now we have labor value left. And now we want to decide what we should do with that labor value. Should we produce more apples? Should we produce more? Do people want more apples or more pencils? How do you find out if people want more apples or pencils? That's
All
the
right.
whole
So,
question.
so,
Wait,
so
that's a question that since like 30 minutes ago is the same question. That is the question.
all right. So what I'm saying is, then that this process is going to happen, right? Once everybody's been met, right? Then the consensus, the dynamic consensus problem is so process is going to occur, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you're going
What
to
does
be
that mean?
negotiating. Okay, so there's going to
Who's
be this
negotiating with
negotiation.
who?
So there's going to be a negotiation between the individual workers with their particular bosses, right? And
Wait, who's
then
their
with
bosses?
the bosses are, let's say, the central planning committee, right? The ones that own the stuff, the means of production.
Why do they own it? I thought it was everybody owns it, and
Yeah, well, it
everybody
was yeah, it is.
everybody
So
owns
it is
it.
collectively, exactly. So it is collectively owned, but they are the central committee. They are the people, as in they're the ones that make the decisions.
So there is,
I
that's
mean,
what I
so, right?
meant
It's not
before with the
the
example of the football club. There is one party involved. There is one minority involved. Like, there can be one person, there can be two persons, there can be three persons that basically have all the power to do whatever they want at their whim, right?
no, no, because they have to take into account the wants and needs of the individual
So
workers
they're being,
in order for them to make decisions that are going to
okay.
make the last in the long
So
run.
they are being elected democratically. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they are being elected
Okay,
democratically, but at
but
the same time they're making that decision. But at the same time they're making that
representative
decision.
democracy.
Yeah, but at the same time they are speaking to the people, asking them, okay, what is the amount that you would feel content with, right?
But
And they are gathering this information.
But do you see how that's not different in principle? That's the same thing as just asking people what they want directly. They only have, in our example, there is only two products. Okay, we've just simplified it, but it's the same principle also with more complicated. Like we've just simplified it for argument's sake. But it's completely the same thing if we have a direct democracy or representative democracy. That's basically the same thing. You have consensus based on voting. What should be produced? One goes ahead and says, I am going to produce more pencils, and everyone is going to vote for that person, right? Like it works the same way as it works right now in our democracy, right? So basically, it is democracy. It is the same as just asking people what they want, asking them to write a number down and voting for it, basically. So the problem with that is that there is no cost attached to that. So if you're asking someone, what do you want? Do you want us to like, how much do you need apples? How much do you need pencils? Like if we ask them that, since there is no cost attached, they can just write down any number that they want, right? And you have no way of finding out what they actually need.
Exactly. So so that's the thing, is that you are making now a difference between the what they need and what they want. Now we know what they need.
Is already covered. The need is already covered. We don't need that. We don't need that. We now talk about what extra do they want. So how would you do that? You would ask the people, right? You would ask them, how many apples do you want? How many pencils do you want? Right? You ask that to each individual, and then you get basically, you collect that, and then you decide how many apples and how many pencils extra to produce, right? But the problem is, when you ask that question, since there is no cost attached to someone writing a number down, they can just write down the maximal number that they want, right? One guy really likes apples and he just writes a plus infinity to next to apples, right?
Obviously, that's not gonna happen that way. Why? Right? You're gonna give them because you're gonna give them certain parameters. The amount can actually the amount that we have, and they are going to be aware of the opportunity costs in a way that is different from just looking at the price of, right? They're going to be aware of that.
Wait, there is no prices.
Listen, and let's say that you think, okay, and let's say as the planner, okay, you know very well that your people tend to overestimate what they want, right? They tend to make estimations that are, let's say 120% above what they would actually be content with, right?
How do you have? Then how do you know you don't have a reference number? You could never get that number because you would need any type of how do you get a reference number? How do you get an overestimation? Because you have some cases in which you know the actual number and you know the set number, the number that is being expressed, and you compare the actual number to the expressed number, and then you use that for other cases. But in our example, you don't even have any case of that. You will not find a single case where you have the actual number because you don't have a market.
Okay, so let me put it in the example, right? Let's say that in this economy, somebody says, okay, I need...
Victor, one thing, sorry. You're cutting off more and more. Is there anything you can do with the microphone? I want you to be heard well. It's cutting off for longer periods, like always like 2 seconds or something like that. Maybe you can turn it off and on, something like that.
But it's the problem is the microphone, or what is the problem?
I'm not sure. Your image is fine, like you're not freezing, but the sound is like, for a couple of seconds, it's I can't hear you. I can just see your lips moving.
Well, I really don't know.
Maybe closer to the microphone. Maybe it is do you have any filter on it or something like that?
Yeah, I do have a filter. This is like the thing that goes into
minimum volume, where it cuts off after a certain threshold if there is not enough volume. Is that possible? Do you have that filter?
I am not sure. Let me see.
Maybe if you can turn down the filter a little bit, maybe that could help. Because I have one like this, but it's generally just works for like very small noises. Cuts off very small noises.
What about now?
You sound a little bit further away and less loud. I could make you more loud, but you're
Okay.
definitely less loud. Let's try like this.
Okay, let's try like this
I'll just turn up your volume here. Just let me know in case you should change your microphone again, because then you will be extremely loud on the other.
Or,
Yeah.
maybe let me change it to this other option.
Okay.
What about now?
I mean,
What
it's
about now?
fine. It's fine for now. Right now, we can try. Let's just try.
Okay.
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 Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but it was getting really bad.
No, I understand. So where did we left off? So I was saying that let's say, okay, for instance, that somebody says, okay, I need 100 apples to be content, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know that this is really an overestimate.
How do you know?
Right? All right, so you would know this from a wide range of possible things, right? First of all, you can know this from previous interactions with this individual, right? Previous interactions
This
with an
previous
individual.
interaction would presume that you have a number that they've said and an actual number that was the case.
Yeah, so you know previously what they have been accepting, right? And if you know previously what they have been
What do you mean by
accepting,
accepting?
and today, let's say that the previous years, okay, they were content with having 60 apples. All right, and now this year they say 200.
What do you mean
You
by
clearly know that
content? Like, what do you mean by content?
but then you mean that they are happy enough, right? So that they are happy enough not to be making a fuss about it, right?
You're trying to find, you're trying to measure basically happiness in an empirical way. You're basically saying, okay, let's attach happiness measures. Like, let's try to measure their happiness and let's optimize for happiness, right? That's what you're trying to do.
Yeah. So you're trying to optimize exactly for welfare.
Okay, but still, like the that's an acceptable way to go about it, right? But then you would also have to basically the leap between happiness and the goods that you're producing is still quite significant, right? And on the way there, you're completely blind. You're basically just trying out shit and trying to increase the happiness of that person, but it's the rest. The way there is completely blind, right?
Not necessarily. I mean, you're going to definitely be working with the input that they give you themselves. You're going to be working with the previous information that you have about it. You're going to be working with the information that the surrounding people to that to that particular person, in the general community, whatever they are saying, many sources of information. So you're not blind.
You're
That sense.
assuming you're assuming that you have a device that will tell you the actual happiness that someone has from receiving a unit of apples.
No, you're gonna
Like,
make a
that's what
guess,
you
right?
that's what you have to
Just
assume.
as you were saying before that we can always make a guess about the risk of an action, we can always make a guess as to what is going to make somebody happy or
Yeah,
content.
but the happiness is not a direct indicator of someone wanting something. That's not the same thing.
What do you mean by that?
Like, I want the Ninja Creamy, okay? Do you know what a Ninja Creamy is?
No.
It's an ice making machine, okay? It's a high intensity mixer basically. It's a blender, but a very strong one that you can make ice cream with, okay? I want that a lot. And then I bought it and I was extremely happy about it. But then other stuff I wanted and I bought it and I got it and it didn't give me any type of happiness at all. Like, those are not the same thing.
Yeah,
These are
yeah,
just not the
absolutely. I
same
mean,
thing. Like, this is just not the same. Like, wanting something and being happy about it are just not the same thing.
Absolutely, and this is one of the things that is the at the forefront of the criticisms of consumerism, right?
But you're not
Where
able
people
to
are
measure to the information that is being lost. You're not able to measure by measuring their happiness. That's my point.
no. So again, happiness is such a complicated subject, right? That is purely psychological and it's dependent on many different factors, right? There are some uh, psychologists and some sociologists that try to give equations as to what happiness is all about, right? And to things like satisfaction and whatnot. And I think that those are interesting approaches to it. And those are certainly the metrics that we should try to be maximizing for. And we can calculate the happiness that people can receive from certain things using these metrics.
Sure, but
But
the
obviously,
problem.
there is a subjective component. So, obviously, sorry that I interrupt. There is definitely a subjective component, and we can never be fully certain, right? And this is why I want to come back to your earlier point about risk, right? You are never fully certain what the best guess is,
No,
but you
that's
can
a
always make
different.
a guess.
That is completely different. I'm not claiming that there is not a best guess for happiness. That's not what I'm claiming. I agree that there
Okay.
is a best guess for happiness. I'm just saying that that's not a good replacement for the thing that we lost. The thing that we lost is not happiness as an information. That's not the information that got lost by us not having a market. The thing that we lost is how much people want
But see, now,
something.
now I think you're
That's
switching your
something
argument
different.
now. I think you're switching your argument now because before you were saying that it is impossible
Mm-hmm.
to make economic calculations
Mm-hmm.
in a central planning way.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're saying that, well, no, that's not really the issue. The issue is that it is not as good as markets. And this is why
No,
I'm
no, no,
saying
no,
that
no. I'm still saying it's impossible. Why do you say that I'm saying? Why do you say that I'm? Why do you think that I'm switching?
because you said that the you can that it is true that you can always make a guess, but it's not going to be as good as the
No, no, it's
information that you
not the
get
same
from.
thing. It's just not the same thing. Like
All right,
you
it's not
have
the same thing, but it is viable. It is
but
viable.
you want to you want to know the value of a certain good, right? That's what you want to know. And in order to know what the value of that is, you need to know how much people want that. That's
So
the information
let me
that you
tell you
need.
exactly what you need to know, right?
Wait,
So
wait, wait.
what you need to know is how much of that do you need in order to satisfy the needs of the people in that particular economy, right? That's something that you need to know, and that is something that you can know. And you also need to know how much it is going to cost to produce that.
The thing that you call cost right now, we don't really know what that means. Like
Yes, well, I'm talking about technical costs.
across goods, we don't know what that means.
I'm talking about technical costs, right? So
Wait,
it's going to
wait.
cost you this amount of labor, this amount of land, this amount of, technical
Yeah.
costs.
But you have no way of comparing these, and you have no way of creating an optimization function for that. You have no way
Yes, as I'm
of
saying, this is going to
that's
happen
the
through a
problem. That's the whole
again,
issue.
this is going to happen through a investigation, right? You're going to investigate how many people are demanding this in what proportions. You're going to make
That's
guesses,
that's the thing
and
that
those
you're not
guesses are
able to
going
do.
to be are going to happen.
That's the thing that's impossible to do. Wait, can we agree? Like, do you agree that the value of something is coming from supply and demand? That's what value is.
No, I think that value is social in a capitalist market economy
No,
or in any generalized exchange
it
economy. Value is in
like
any
everything that
generalized.
goes beyond, like in this case that we constructed, that the thing is valuable, that is both higher in demand. Like the thing will be more valuable to people. Like you have this village, right? We have this example of the village, right? And the basic needs of everyone are met, and then we have this surplus product, like this more in terms of products, right? And we have 50 apples and 100 pencils. and the value of each apple and each pencil will depend on how much apples and pencils there are and how much apples and pencils are wanted. So it's basically, even in your planned economy, people will attribute value to these objects according to supply and demand, right? Or is that what do you think the value people will attach to
it
it?
depends on what you talk. It depends on what you're referring to when you say value, right? When I speak of value, I speak of a particular emergent property that comes from capitalist market economies, right? Now, if you say that people are still going to have preferences in any society, that's for sure. People are going to have preferences.
No, I'm not
But
talking about
preferences.
that.
So
Like, if there is just
what is your meaning of, what is your definition of value then?
like what people would be willing to give up for it to get it.
All right, so
On
that is your
average,
definition.
but not on a subjective, like one person levels, but on a
collective.
like if you take the average of that, right?
All right, perfect. So let's work with your definition.
So if
of
we
value
have just one apple and 50 pencils, after having satisfied everyone's base needs, if there is some demand for apples, the value of this apple will be extremely high because there is just one apple there. Do you disagree with that?
So it depends on how many people are demanding that apple.
Yeah, exactly. So supply and demand is making this apple extremely valuable or not valuable at all.
Right. So in your definition of value, yes. So in your definition of value, yes,
so okay. So but that's the thing that we're trying to find out. When we say what should we produce, we're trying to produce the thing that is more valuable, right? We want to produce the thing that is more valuable. We don't want to produce the thing that is less valuable. We don't want to produce 50 pencils and one apple and have no one, even though no one wants an extra pen. Like, you just need one pen, but you would be really good with eating some extra apples, right? So we want to produce the thing that is more valuable, and therefore we have to find out, since we want to determine the supply, we want to find out what the demand is for the apple in that case, and for the pencil, for both of these things. So, and since we're trying to find out the demand, it is not helpful to us to measure happiness of people, to optimize for happiness, because that's not the thing that we're trying to find out. We're trying to find out what the demand is, which is separate from happiness.
All right. So in your case, certainly, if you want to know the value of that particular apple that is remaining after everybody's needs are met, obviously that in your particular framework is going to depend on the demand, and we can know the demand, right? We can say, okay, how many this apple, and then we can calculate.
No, how will we know? How will we know how many people want the apple?
We can ask them, for instance.
Yeah, you ask them. You will not ask them, do you want an apple, yes or no? You will ask them, and first of all, since there is no cost attached, if you ask them, do you want an apple, yes or no, everybody will just say yes. There is no cost attached to saying no.
Not necessarily. Some people will say yes, and some people will say no.
There is no cost attached to saying no. And also, secondly, there is no.
You can say. I mean, you can definitely attach a cost to saying no. I mean, if there is an apple standing there, you can say, okay, the cost to you having the apple is that this other person is not gonna get the apple, right? And if that person is thinking, oh, well, maybe this other person needs the apple more than I do, then they can see the cost, right? Then they can have a feeling for the cost.
Okay, so now you're assuming that people will act altruistically, right?
Not necessarily.
That's
right?
the definition of altruism. Like,
some people will, and some people will not, and that is why you need to
have to assume
feedback.
Like, if you assume that there is a cost attached to saying yes, you have to assume altruism in the thing that you just said. Like the only way you can attach a cost to saying no would be through altruistic reasons.
I mean, let's say, okay, so let's say it's 10 people in the village, right?
Yes.
And there are 3 who are altruistic and there are 7 who are not, right? Maybe the 7 people will say, yes, I do want the apple because they're selfish, they don't care about the needs of the other. But there are at least 3 who are going to be able to say no.
Okay,
right?
so you do
that
assume.
so that reduces the value instantly of the apple, right?
Bro, you could have just
Because
said
now
yes, because you do assume that there is altruistic people in there, in order to have like only for these people that there is a cost.
Assumption? Is that an unfair assumption that there's going to be at
I
least
haven't said, I
1 or
didn't say
2 or
that.
3 people?
I just want to make sure that to register that in order for your system to work, we have to assume altruistic behavior, right?
Not in order for my system to work.
Then don't mention it. Then you should be able to construct it without altruistic people in
because
there.
listen, I mean, what I'm saying is that I'm working with what is natural, and what is natural is that there are people who are altruistic and there are other people who are not. So I'm
You
just
can say
describing a reality.
You can say that. You can say that the reality is that there is altruistic people, and I can agree or disagree with you, but the facts of the matter are that you're not able to construct a cost for saying yes without altruistic people existing.
No, I'm saying that is going to be one component of the cost is going to be that.
Give me
So
okay, if I say that is the condition for your argument to work, then the easiest way to disprove me saying that would be to give an example where there is a cost attached to saying no that is not altruistic. You should be able to do that then.
Okay, yeah, okay, all right. So, and that is what I'm working for. But like what you are trying to do now is you're trying to focus on me saying that that is going to be one component of it, and now that we have established that this is going to be one component of it, we can go to the next, right? So, like again, there's no ulterior motive here, right? I'm just saying that there's going to be different costs that we're going to have to take into account, and one of them is going to be the cost coming from the altruistic nature of some people, not of all, right? And then the other one is going to come from the fact that in order for people to get that apple, they're going to have to negotiate for it, right? And there are people who are going
to have to negotiate. They're being asked to vote for.
They're being asked for it, right? And
what do they have to negotiate?
For it, yeah, but in they're asking for it, it's not a decision to give it to them, right?
What are you doing? Like the thing that you're trying to find out is the demand, right? And you're just asking them.
So 7 people say yes, right? So now you know that the demand is 7 people.
Wait, you're trying to
only 1 apple.
Wait, you're trying to give me an example where there is no altruistic people, because you're trying to prove to me right now that your system is not relying on altruism in order to work. So there is not 7, it's 10.
Okay, so let's say it's 10. But again, like it works perfectly well with 7. I don't know why you're making such
I agree that I agree that your system would work if we assume that there is altruism.
But why are you trying to impose the strict condition that there is no altruism?
Because you have claimed that your system is able to work to attach that in your system there would be a cost attached to saying yes to an apple without altruism existing. That's what was your claim. Because I asked you.
My claim is that no. So,
bro, I asked you. No, I asked you. Then I asked you again.
Listen to my claim. My claim is that it will work, okay, even if there are people that are not altruistic, but not that everybody is not altruistic. It can still probably work in that way. Let's say
my question.
Okay, I mean, like it's like just wording, man. Like you're really. Yes, you are absolutely right now. What you're doing is just sticking your finger on points that we have already discussed and that are really not that important. Okay,
no, it's very important.
Let's say you want just in to move forward. Okay,
I don't want to move forward.
You say okay, just to move forward. Okay, 10 people are gonna demand the apple. Now you know the demand.
because there is
Now
no
you know the
cost,
demand.
because there is no cost attached to saying and then you ask for the pencil, and then 10 people are going to say yes to the pencil, and now you basically could have not voted at all. You already know what the answer is going to be before voting. You didn't get any information from voting. Do you see the problem?
All right. So in this instance, you got the information that everybody wants it, and that is
Yeah, everybody wants
information
everything. That's the information that you
no,
got.
but
But that's
not true.
that's not wanting. That's wishing, basically. So you didn't find out what everybody wants, what everybody actually is ready to give up something for, right?
So okay. So to move forward, now we have established in this particular society where everybody is selfish and they're going to want maximum amount of everything. Okay, in this particular society,
I'm not saying that they want
by
that. I'm saying that they would
asking,
claim that.
by asking, you are receiving valuable information, which is everybody wants a lot of everything.
Yeah. We
So
already
that
knew that
already that
beforehand.
is valuable.
That is
So
already
so
no
that-
wait. That is already the assumption that we have before even voting. So you could have just not voted and would end up with the same information. So I don't know why you would vote.
that shouldn't be the assumption that you go into before the voting, right?
Then you would assume that there is altruistic behavior there, and that's why I asked you. I think that your system only relies on the assumption that there is altruistic behavior there. That's why it's such an important. Wait, Victor, that's important to me. Like that's why it's not just wording or like me being pedantic or something like that. It's at a core issue of what we think that people will act like, right? Like if we imagine a society where everyone is altruistic, I think that we don't even need the distribution part. I think that people will just give each other stuff and just produce together, and just like the whole reason why we do this distribution in the first place, why we even have this planned economy, is because people are not altruistic, and is because people are generally selfish, and is to disrupt that. So that's why it's a core disagreement with your system that I have.
No, because I do not think that everybody is altruistic, and I don't work on that assumption, right?
In fact, then you should be able to find out the demand without relying on altruism.
But I'm not finding out the but no, I mean, I'm not finding out the demand based on altruism. I'm saying that even if everybody is not altruistic, you can still know the demand. Demand, you can still know the first case of the demand, which is going to be, okay, everybody is wanting a lot of everything.
But that's not
starting from that point, that's going to be the starting point, right? And from there, you're going to have to, yeah, I mean, that's how negotiations work, right? Listen. This is how negotiations work. When you go to a negotiation, people are obviously going to, most of the time, they're going to say, okay, I want this, right? And it's going to be more than what they will actually be willing to accept. And then you reduce up to the point where they're going to be content.
Why do you vote? Why did you let them vote?
Because that's the starting point.
No,
why do you start any negotiation? I mean, man, why do you start any negotiation? Why should we start any negotiation then?
When we vote, I don't know what you mean when you say negotiation, but when we vote, what are we trying to... Wait. Do you think it makes any sense? Do you think it makes any sense for us to vote if we already know the outcome of the vote?
Of course it makes sense.
It makes sense to vote if we already know the outcome of the vote? Do we get any information?
I mean, let me again say, we don't know exactly the vote, but even then it is important for us to be sure that that is the outcome of the vote, right? So right now,
dude, we're just making up that example. Yeah.
Right now, we could be sure, okay, that if we vote, most of the people in Spain will probably say no. I'm saying for instance.
We're talking about a village. We're talking about the village. In the village, we said, okay, we have 10 people in the village and we asked them to vote, okay? And then if we assume that there is no altruistic people, if we don't take the assumption that there is altruistic people, then 10 votes will say yes to apples and 10 votes will say yes to pencils. Therefore, we don't have to vote. We already know the answer to the question because there is a cost. there is no cost attached to saying yes. And if you're not altruistic, you cannot come up with a cost that is attached to saying yes to that.
All right. So let me continue. Now that you know that everybody wants the pencil, now is when you start to negotiate by saying, all right, so every one of you wants this apple, but obviously not everybody can get the apple. So then the negotiation comes. Okay, who worked more? What all of these other criteria, right?
We're trying to find out what we should produce right now.
Right. So then when finding out what we should produce,
Yes.
then it is again, you're gonna ask the people, right?
Yeah,
And then
they're
you're gonna say,
yes to
okay, and
everything.
they're gonna tell you this. And then you're gonna say, okay, but we obviously cannot produce this amount, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna give them so you're gonna have, as the central planner, you're gonna have information as to all of the costs in producing, and you're going to be communicating with the people on what those costs are, right? And if the costs of producing as many apples as the people demanded are too high, you're going to tell them, look, it's not feasible, right? Economically, this is not feasible.
Let's say
You're
the
going
costs
to
are the same.
negotiate with them. So you're going to negotiate with them an amount that is going to be feasible and at the same time that they are going to be willing to agree on.
Wait, first of all, you have a problem. Okay. If you want to if you want to tell them what the costs are, you run into the same problem that you're trying to fix. Okay? Because if you have like one thing, first of all, we have now introduced new goods on the market. We used to have just two, and that was the assumption. But now you're introducing new goods, basically. Let's say stone, sticks, and I don't know, sand. Okay, you've now introduced three more new goods, and now we don't know how to compare those, right? So now you have no way of comparing these goods between each other. So you just swapped one problem for the other. You haven't solved any problems right now. You're trying to find out what, let's say one takes, so that's the first problem. If they have differing costs, right? Costs, quote unquote. Let's say they have the same costs. What do you do then, right? Then it's just pure preference. Like you would end up with the same problem.
No, so again, you have the technical costs, and those are the ones that you're going to be communicating. And through the negotiation, you're going to get the cost, considering both the technical and what they're willing to give up, right? So if you tell them, look, if you have the amount of apples that you would like to have, that you have put here in this piece of paper that you would like to have, then you're not going to get this amount of pencils. And then they're going to tell you, all right, so let me reduce then the amount of apples 6 instead of 10, right? So then you know what they're willing to give up of apples in order to have more pencils, right? So again, you start from the technical costs, you consider the preferences that they state, and then you come to an agreement.
But what they get, like what share they get, and what they get is not dependent upon what they say what they want, right? That's not a one-to-one. That is not a
dynamic process.
That is not a one-to-one correlation. That's
because
not,
this is a dynamic process.
no,
right?
no.
They're going to
That's
say
the thing.
something.
No, that's the thing that needs to be determined after that. Like first, you have to determine what people want, just what people want. It's not, you cannot, they cannot put in their the information of what they're going to get cannot be in there, because first, in order to find out what they're going to get, you have to know what you will produce, and in order to know what you will produce, you have to know what they want. So you can't use what they will get as an argument for which one they want. Do you see my point?
So what I'm saying is that you will have information. So like as in anything in economics, imagine a good exchange economy. This works with every economy. There is this concept in economics called the production possibilities frontier, right? And this is the objective measurement of how much stuff we can produce of any given good, comparing the amount of resources that we have and the amount of resources that we need to be invested into the production of another good, Are you familiar with this concept of,
No,
for
but I
example,
can.
Yeah.
It seems pretty straightforward. We have a
All
maximum.
right.
Yeah.
All right. So then this is the information that you're gonna start with, and then you're gonna have also
The
information
maximum
as to,
amount of pencils that we can produce and the maximum amount of apples that we can produce, right? If we put all our resources and efforts, like, because we assumed in our example that we just have 2 units of goods, right? And then we have labor work, right?
yeah.
So assuming that, and actually with labor work we would even have 3. So let's assume we just have 2, okay? With these 2, we have a maximum amount of apples we can produce, a maximum amount of, if we don't produce any pencils, and we have a maximum amount of pencils we produce without, if we don't produce any apples, right?
We have all the others in between, right? We
And
also
all the
have
others in between, exactly, all the mix. So
exactly.
now what is that, how does that attach any cost to saying yes or no to wanting an apple or not?
Again, so the opportunity cost is a technical cost. And then you're going to ask, okay, how much of each do you want? And they're going to tell you, I want something that is beyond the production possibilities frontier. And then you're going to negotiate with them in order to get to a point where they are happy and at the same time they are within the
But you
production possibilities
see,
frontier.
you're now introducing the concept of empirically measuring happiness, because you're trying to find some information. You're trying to basically optimize your function for a certain parameter, right? Like before, in market situation, we can optimize for the most valuable good, right? We can optimize for the most value created, and then we have a very easy optimization, a linear function that we can solve for, right? But in the case of you need basically something else other than producing valuable goods, and you're trying to attach that to empirical happiness.
So
Without
I'm
that,
trying
you're
to
not
attach
able to
that.
get an
So
optimization
listen, I'm
function.
trying to attach that to a dynamic negotiation process where people are maybe not in a purely empirical technical sense maximizing their utilities, right? Because I don't even believe that this is possible. I don't believe in this concept of the maximization of. What I'm saying is that you're gonna have a society where you are maximizing cohesion, welfare in general, right? Where people are gonna get enough to live and enough to feel like in that society they can still work the next day without being overwhelmed by the societal dynamics that are going on,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that is the
But
feeling that you're gonna
happiness,
get.
do you see, like, the thing is, like, the reason why I'm making this difference between wanting something and being happy, like, that's, and I think that's like where it gets like very real,
Yeah,
is that happiness is not the same as wanting something. And
of course.
people, and yeah, and that's the information that you're missing. And
No, but I'm not missing that. I just acknowledge that, and it doesn't in any way uh hinder my argument.
also, what do you like, you want something, right? And the thing that you want the most, like, we want to find out what you want the most, right? And the fulfillment of that is what makes you happy, right? Let's assume that, like, that the fulfillment of what you want the most makes you happy. Even if we assume that, right?
Okay.
The reason why basically I'm saying that you're blind on the way there, like, even if we assume that wanting and happiness have like this direct correlation, with which you also seem to be skeptical of, even then basically we have to poke around and basically fulfill a lot of your wishes before we can at some point then fulfill the right one, and then we see a spike in happiness, right? That's how it would work. Whereas, and that with like infinite possibilities of wants and wishes, right? So we
Yeah.
first have to always trial and error, trial and error, trial and error, and it always changes, right? Like, your wants and wishes always changes. So we always have to like give you something, see if your happiness spikes, and then say, great, but we can't even give you that again because you might have changed your wants and wishes by then, right? After getting that for the first time. So then we again have to trial and error, give you that, and then after we see another spike. Whereas in capitalism, or I don't want to say capitalism because that's like some people consider it complete free market economy, which I'm not in favor of. But whereas in a market economy, we already know very precisely what you want. And we don't need to do the trial and error. The thing that you want is the thing that you're ready to give up something for, and how much you want it is determined by the price you're willing to pay for it.
So even
On
there,
average.
so even there, I am not fully convinced of that. But let me say this, okay? It is a really big conversation, right? The conversation on what happiness truly is. There are many different philosophical stances on this, right? And I don't think we need to answer that question. Right?
You cut off completely. You cut off for like 3 seconds there.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that last sentence?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that the question of what true happiness is, right, and what really makes people happy, is a deeply complicated question that has many different philosophical answers.
You brought it up.
I don't think,
I never brought up happiness.
And I don't even think that this needs to be answered in order for us to make economic plans, right? But that's why I'm saying that
you took it to have a parameter for your optimization problem. Like you took happiness to be the thing that you're trying to optimize for.
All right. So what I said is there is the soft problem of
just sorry, Victor. I'm just one more add-on. And in our example, we can even simplify happiness. I've basically even granted you that we have a happiness measurement machine that one-dimensionally measures just your happiness perfectly. That's the thing that I've basically completely assumed just for argument's sake. So we have a very simple form of happiness just for your argument. Because you have introduced happiness, right? I haven't introduced happiness. It's basically there to give you an objective grounds to base your optimization problem on.
Okay, so let me once again reformulate what I already said at the beginning. Right, there's the soft problem of economic planning, and there is the hard problem. The soft problem is whether economic plans can be done at a technical level, and they can. And you haven't demonstrated that this cannot be done, right? So this is the first thing.
You were not able to construct one example where you're able to find out the demand.
No, and I did, I did construct them, and you were unable to show me why that wasn't possible, right? But let's step aside from this for an issue for a second. The next problem is the hard problem, which is whether economic planning can lead to full welfare maximizing solutions, right? To economic distribution. And this is the one where I'm saying that we would need to answer the very deep philosophical problem of what is welfare, what truly is happiness, etc. And this is a problem where I'm not answer to, but to the answer of the soft question of economic plan, the soft problem of economic planning, there is an answer, and there are many economists that can indeed produce economic plans, and it is perfectly viable. Now, again, at this moment in time, it is not possible to do this at a generalized level in the whole world, and this is why at the current moment I am not making the case to move to a fully planned economy, because there are many things that need to happen first in order for us to reach that stage, right? So that's why I prefer now to defend more democratic socialist perspectives and market economy socialist perspectives, right? So this is mostly what I've been arguing for this amount of time. Now, you were skeptical of the possibility to do economic planning at a generalized level in an economy. And I think that this is completely possible. And the problem of knowledge can be satisfied with this dynamic democratic interaction between different levels at the planning schema.
I'm a little bit torn. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, on a personal level, I find you very sympathetic, and I think I don't know. It's, but I'm really like torn on how much you believe the things that you're actually saying. Like, I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure, because there is, like, not even on a conscious level, but maybe like on a subconscious level. I don't want to get to like, but like, and I will explain why I think that. Also, I'm not just gonna make some statements like that without explaining myself. But
Mhm.
there is a lot of incentive, I think, in our current society to be not just a leftist, not just a social democrat, but to be a Marxist, to be a socialist, to be like, at least on an international, on an intellectual level. I think you're basically being incentivized to hold way more extreme positions than yeah. That's basically my belief. I think that's true for the right, and I think that's basically true for most areas. So that's one thing. So, and the reason why I'm like torn on why I'm not sure if you believe that is because we started out basically very easily. I've basically said, okay, I don't believe that this is that it's possible, because there is a loss of information. You're not able to do that. And then you say, I can do that. And then we start going into an example. And in that example, we agreed that what you try to find out is how much people, what you need to find out in order to decide what you want to produce. What you need to find out is basically how much people want a certain good. And in order to find that out, you've decided to use consensus. After many back and forths, we've agreed on consensus being the way to go. And consensus, in this case, we've said, okay, it's voting. We've had a few back and forths on that as well. Then we've said it's voting. And then we found out that basically we already know, if we don't assume altruistic behavior, we found out that voting will not give us any more information than before. Because we already theoretically right now, me and you, can agree that if we don't assume, purely theoretically, if we don't assume altruism, we already know the outcome of the voting. Therefore, the lack of information that you're trying to basically get, or the information that you're trying to get from voting, you're not able to get. That's the last step where we arrived in your one example that you were supposed to give me to prove to me that this is possible. And now we've basically kind of moved away from there, but this is still an open question. So, and then now you saying, yeah, I've given you an example. I don't know. I think you're a smart guy. I think you're really aware of the conversation. You're able to track the conversation very well. I've had other conversationalist partners who were not able to track a conversation like you're on point. You know where the problems lie, and etc. But then now you're saying that you have been able to show me an example. I don't know. I don't think you believe that, because we're not done yet. Basically, we're there still with the voting, and the voting is not giving us any new information. So, and you were doing the voting to get an information. So I don't know. Do you want to continue on that lens? What do you think about that?
All right. So I already moved beyond that. I don't know if you've been after that,
Mm-hmm.
but let me also say that I do believe also a well-intentioned guy, and that you are also pretty intelligent. Have been tracking this conversation very nicely as well. I like you also, and I have nothing really against you. So if at some points in our conversation in a little bit more confrontational, it doesn't come from any bad blood that I have against you, or I also know that you don't have, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, so this is just a friendly conversation that sometimes gets a little bit heated
Yes.
And this is, I think, that what should give you an impression that I truly believe in what I'm, and that also gives me an impression that you believe in. Because if you are not invested, at least to some degree, right, on the things that you're talking about, you're not gonna get passion when you speak about it,
True.
right? You're not gonna get heated when you speak about it. So I
Exactly.
think that getting heated is absolutely an indication that you truly believe what you uh, but it definitely doesn't come from bad blood. It just comes from the fact that we are both interested in subjects and opinions that we believe are important, right? And that are certainly good for society. So
100%.
let me then go back again to this, right? So what I said is we have different levels that we are working with when we're doing planning, right? We have the central committee, we have the individuals that have to work, we have the state owned enterprises, right? So we're going to have different levels that are going to be working together to achieve a certain goal. And then we also have to factor in the individual preferences, the needs, and we're also going to have to factor in the non-altruistic nature of, let's say, for sake of argument, everybody. Okay, everybody's going to be self-interested. So in this context, we're going to have to be working with the next things. First, we're going to need a production possibilities frontier. And this is a technical production possibilities frontier that we can absolutely construct, right? With mathematical models, with data, with
Wait, what
a
does that
bunch
mean?
of statistical
I don't
processes.
I don't know what that means. Production frontier.
So the production possibilities frontier is a model in economics that tells us how much of every good in society we can produce at a maximum employment of the factors of production in that economy, right? All the combinations
Yeah.
of all the
Yeah, the thing
goods
that
in
we talked about
society.
before. Yeah.
Exactly, the thing that is the
Yeah.
production possibilities frontier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that we can calculate, right? So
Absolutely. That
this is
just
a
tells us our
technical,
supply. That tells us everything about our supply.
exactly, that tells us everything about supply.
Absolutely.
All right, and
No
then
worries
let's
about
talk
that.
about demand, and let's talk
Yes.
about demand.
Yes.
So let's assume that everybody is going to want infinite quantities of all of those goods, right? Well, obviously that's not going to be feasible, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be beyond the production possibilities frontier. So the process then is one of negotiation, right? Where you say, all right, look, this is the production possibilities frontier, and let's decide together what the outcome within this production possibilities frontier is best for
Mm-hmm.
society, right?
But the
And that is
yeah.
how the distribution is going to happen.
The problem here is that the the supply doesn't tell you anything about the distribution. Therefore, there is no cost attached to me voting for something directly. Do you see that's not a cost, like
Yeah, and that is
like
why, and that is why I said,
so I will
that
always just
let's assume that there is maximum demand. Let's
I
assume
will
that there is,
always select the maximum demand that I can get away with, basically. And
yeah,
that level, that number is not the true demand that there is. The sum of
of
that
course,
number. So you will always be off, basically. You will be always be off by the true demand.
obviously so the demand is always going to be exaggerated, right? And that is why you're going to have to bring the demand down to a realistic level. And that is going to happen through this dynamic negotiation process, right? Where you ask them and they
There
will, I want everything. And then you will
there
tell
is
them,
no
well, you cannot have everything.
there is no negotiation process. There is only a negotiation process if there is a cost on both sides. There is no negotiation
And the costs are there, are the pure technical costs.
These are
right?
new
So
goods.
for
No,
instance,
wait, you're
let
introducing
me give
now.
you a very silly example. Let me give you a very right? So when a kid walks into a store, okay, with their parent, the kid's gonna want every single toy in the store, right? And the parent is gonna tell the kid, right? I believe that a good parent will tell the kid, look, kid, we cannot obviously buy you everything in the store, right? We don't have enough money for that. So listen, why don't we get you one of these, one of those, which is within our budget, and this will make you happy enough, right? And maybe, right? And the kid will not throw a tantrum in the store if you at least buy them this, that. Well, that is a very silly way, but it is possible,
Do
right?
you see
To
how you've
turn
now again introduced two things that we had already thrown out before?
which two things?
The first thing is the word happiness, that you're trying to optimize for happiness. That's the first concept that you've now introduced in your example. You've said happiness. And the second concept that you've introduced is a central figure authority that is able to do that. And we had already decided before that your system that you envision here is a representative democracy that is basically not different than the directly voting for the goods, because that's the only decision that they're making in our example. So
So there is
therefore,
gonna be a so
so
listen. So there is
therefore,
gonna be a
no, wait,
central committee.
there is no central authority that has a monopoly of decision that can just decide it, like with the parent. So this is a concept that doesn't apply for our example. The voting is the thing that makes
No,
basically
no,
the
but I never said that the voting is the thing that does it. I said that there is gonna be a dynamic interaction between the central committee, which is there, and the population and all
the
the other
central
levels.
committee is democratic, right?
Yes, but
Yeah,
then
then it is.
they will have power, but they will
But
have
that's
power
a
to make
vote then as
decisions.
well. That's a vote then as well, right? So there is no actual difference between us directly voting for apples and pencils and us electing representatives that then
There is a difference. There is a
there
difference.
is not in terms of power,
There
in
is a
terms of
difference
who
because
change.
when you vote for it, you will vote for the person that everything, but the person, once they are empowered, they cannot provide everything and they will make compromises. And that is how politics works.
Bro, why would I not, like, let's say I have
But this
it's
happens
what is the
today. This
difference?
happens today in
Wait,
democratic in socialist.
wait,
This happens today in
what
our
is
democratic countries.
no, no,
Politicians
no,
will say
no.
yes. They will
Victor,
say, okay,
what is the
I'm going to
difference?
invest in roads and I'm going to give all this money
What is
to
the
social causes and I'm going to give all this money to education,
what is the difference
health, and
between
to
me saying yes to pencil and yes to maximum amount for pencils, maximum amount for apples, and me voting for someone that says maximum apples and maximum pencils for everyone?
the difference is that once the person gets in power and sees the possibility of production, they will in turn say, look, we cannot do that. And they will go to a more nuanced, more balanced position that puts us back in the possibilities frontier.
You're 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 trying to find out what everybody wants. That's what you're trying to find out. You're trying to find out the demand. Okay?
So again,
No, wait,
what I'm
no.
trying to find out is the level at which people will generally overall be content.
Now you have introduced happiness again. You see?
But this is not happiness.
But
Contentment
content
is
and
not.
happiness is the same thing.
No, it is not. Happiness, happiness is the subjective feeling of satisfaction. Contentment is this. So it's like if it were it's the maximization of happiness is not the same thing as contentment, right? Contentment is the idea that okay, maybe I'm not fully happy with what I have, but I am happy enough for it to be decent, right?
It's
For me
to
to be
me it's
for me accepting of it.
okay. I it's to me it's no different. Is you're trying to take the same arguments I have against happiness I would have against content as well. It's the same. Like
But
there's no
contentment is something that
it's just one
measurable.
feeling. You have the same issue with content as you have with happiness, where you don't have a direct correlation between what people want and with what people makes people content. And even if you would have to guess. Once you see a spike in content, then you would be fine, and then you would have to guess again. It's the same problem like with happiness. It's the exact same argument. There is literally no difference between content and
let
happiness.
Me ask you this: what is the problem? What is the problem with the system that I outlined?
Wait, with the content, where content is the thing that is.
We're trying to look for a metric where obviously people are not going to be fully satisfied because their needs, as we said, are infinite, right?
Yes.
So
their wants and wishes.
Infinite, so they're not going to be fully satisfied, but they're going to be satisfied enough for them not to think, "Oh my God, this society doesn't work. I'm gonna move to the next."
No, wait. When you say, I'm having trouble understanding your question. So, is your question, what is the problem with a planned economy that optimizes for content or happiness? What is the problem with that? Are you asking me that?
Oh, yeah. My problem is what is the question that I'm asking is what is the problem with the system that I outlined where you know that people are gonna have want, okay, and through this negotiation process you bring them back to the possibilities frontier.
I have no idea what this negotiation process is. So we've started with trying to find out. I don't know. You've introduced this concept of negotiation, and I have no idea what it means, literally, because we start with a.
What is negotiation for you?
Wait. We start with how do we find out how much demand there is for apples and pencils, and you have proposed. We ask the people, we just send out a letter and ask for pencils and apples. And then somewhere there is negotiation happening, but I have no idea how that works and where this starts and what the consensus is for. So
let me go through it again. Let me go through it again. Okay, let me go through it again because it's a
concrete, please.
Let me be honest.
Yes.
It's a little bit frustrating when I'm repeating myself so much.
Please do it using the example. Use the example of the village. We are in a village with 10 people. What happens?
We are in the village with 10 people and 2 goods, right? There's a possibilities frontier, right?
Yes.
All right.
That tells us the demand. That tells us the supply, not the demand.
That is supply.
That is not demand.
But we start from the supply, right? We start from the supply. We
already know the supply, yeah.
And we know that the demand is going to be exaggerated. It's going to be beyond the production possibilities frontier.
No, we don't know that. I mean, we know that it is. We know that it is higher than the actual demand, and it's interesting that you say actual demand because, like, that is kind of interesting. But yeah, we're just going to let it slide. But the actual demand.
What did I say?
You've said that the expressed demand is going to be higher, exaggerated. You said, right? Yes. But the difference between the actual demand and the exaggerated demand, we will never be able to have a measure for that. Because if we would have a measure for that, we wouldn't even need the exaggerated demand. We could just use the actual value.
Okay, so let me give you a very simple way in which we can do this. Okay, so if the kid and they say, I want this and that and.
No, I want you to do it with the village. I don't want you to switch to a different example where you smuggle in happiness and you smuggle in a central authority that is able to make decisions. I want you to do it with the. We just have a village. We don't have a committee. We don't have anything. We just have a village and we have 10 people and we've just asked them for consensus and they've just all returned us the papers.
But again, even in that case, I already said that there a central planning committee, right, in that village.
Yeah, how does that central? We don't even have that yet. Like, you would have to explain to me how the central committee comes about.
It comes about through a democratic election process, right?
Okay.
And then these people are in charge of, and there is obviously going to be a part of it that is democratic, and then there is another that is going to be merit-based, as in, right, there's going to be economists, people that are specialists in the field of economic planning who are going to be working there alongside the elected officials.
So that's completely, you've just said that you repeated yourself 100 times, but that's the first time I'm hearing about this. Okay, that's interesting. So
all right.
So you're basically creating.
I repeat myself on everything else except for this.
Yeah, but because I didn't let you repeat yourself, with the children example because that's a completely different example. Okay, so
That's
you
the
have
first time you were asking me where the committee comes from.
okay, so
So
you
I'm
have
answering.
is this committee so first of all, is this committee democratically elected or not? Because you say, yeah, it could be this, it could be that. Which one is it?
So I think that probably the best combination is there is a part of it that is democratically elected, and then there is another one that is based on expertise on the subject, right? In the case of economic planning, they are experts in economic planning, right? They are economists, mathematicians, statisticians, people that know how these things are
Okay,
done.
and how do they then now we have a representative quasi democracy, whatever, however that's being determined, I don't know. So basically, it would also have to be determined what percentage is aristocracy and what percentage is democracy, right? So we would basically have to have a vote on that as well. So it would be a part of a representative democracy. So now we have elected someone, and now how does this elected person choose what to produce, what the demand is? Because he already knows what the supply is. But now, how would they find out what the demand is for apples and pencils?
All right. So once again, they ask the people, okay, what is
Okay,
the
again.
demand?
Okay, what is the demand? So now they ask the people,
Great.
okay?
So again, they ask, what is the demand? And
Yes.
the people will say
Maximum,
exaggerated
maximum,
thing.
maximum,
They would
maximum,
say
maximum. Maximum they can
maximum,
get away
maximum,
with.
maximum.
Yeah, maximum, maximum,
Right.
maximum.
So then the planner
Wait, why
sits
do they
with these
even
people.
ask? Wait, if we already know that, why do they even ask? Like if
Okay,
me and
so then
you,
let's say they
we
don't
already
ask.
a
Okay, so then
priori,
let's
yeah, okay, they don't even ask that. Yeah, we already a
so let's say
priori
they
know
don't
that.
even ask. But again,
Yeah,
it is important still to know because there's always a chance that they don't say it,
but
right? There's always a
but
chance that they don't say it.
but they would only and now you have to, if you say that there is always the case, there is always the possibility that they don't say that. If you say that, then you would have to provide an example, which you try to do with altruism. The only way you would be able to convince me that.
But maybe it's not altruism. Maybe they
What
just
else?
that they weren't. Maybe that they felt that they didn't need so many apples. That look,
Yeah, but they
if
don't
I eat
have
too
any.
many apples, I'm gonna get a stomach, right?
But they don't
So
have
then
to
they
eat.
say, look,
They don't have to eat the apples, right?
yeah, yeah, they don't have to eat the apple. So if they are just gonna be standing there in their fridge getting rotten and
Yeah.
making bad smell and making bugs come in, they will say, look, I don't want, right?
Yeah. So
They will stop being an economic good and they will become an
so
economic bad
so
for them.
okay. So you have to assume basically that having something can also have negative consequences for you, right? So if there is goods, so that I agree. Wait, I agree. I think it's a good point. Okay, and I agree that there is goods that have negative consequences for you if you have too much of them.
Yeah, so that is one of the
But
limitations, for example.
but most goods, like, since there is it's you could always give away these apples to the people that you want to give it away to, right? You could always j- give it to the
Oh, but
people
then
that you
you're
want.
introducing altruism. But then you're introducing altruism into the picture.
Ye-
They are gonna be
no,
giving away. So
no,
then,
you're not, because you've introduced negative consequences and you do it to avoid negative consequences. It's not altruism, it's egoistic.
I mean, then you could just throw them away, right? You can just then throw them away. But if you give them
Yeah,
to
yeah,
another
yeah,
person,
sure, sure, you could also just throw them away. Yeah,
okay, so
it's the
let's
same.
assume,
Yeah,
okay, they
yeah,
just throw them away. All right.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
so this is irrelevant. Irrelevant to my point.
Wait,
Because my point
no, 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 no,
because my
no.
point is that,
I'm saying I'm agreeing with your point.
yeah, but this is irrelevant to the bigger picture because the bigger picture is that because you know that people are gonna over exaggerate their wants and needs,
No, that's a
what
different
they're
point.
going to, no, because I'm just following the logical procedure that
No,
I
no.
was for, right?
You've
We
said you've
started.
said yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, like, wow, this it's just so complicated to follow up when you're
I
interrupting,
sorry,
and then
go
I
ahead.
interrupt you, and it's like we
Go ahead,
really
go
need
ahead.
to be more
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
careful with this
Yeah.
because I do interrupt you a lot too, right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah.
saying that you are the only one that does this,
I know, I know.
but let me continue. All right. So then the central planner knows, okay, whether by voting or just because they know that it's gonna be vote, that the people are gonna want maximum of everything, right? So then the central planner is gonna sit with them and he's going to say, okay, we cannot have maximum everything, right? So then what is the level within the production possibilities frontier that you would be willing to accept? And then you're forcing them to be within the production possibilities frontier. And they will tell you
How
this,
how
and
would
then
you
you get
force
that
them?
feedback.
But you can only force them if you can attribute a. Wait, you've also skipped a step, but it's okay if you don't want to talk. Like, I wanted to agree with you on one point. I wanted to give you that one point, that in case of goods that have a negative externality, once you have too much of them, like with the rotten apples, right? In that case, there is a cost attached to asking for too many apples, right? But
Yeah.
I would say that the cost is like, okay, that one I grant you. Like, there is some cost attached, but I think
But
it's like
I'm not
it's
looking
very low.
to
But let's assume, like, that's why we just go ahead. We just continue on. So you need this negotiation. You need this negotiation because most products still people will over exaggerate what they want, right? In this negotiation, in order for you to have a negotiation basis, you basically need a cost on both sides. But in this
the
case,
cost is
you
the technical cost. The cost is the
no,
technical
but
cost.
the
Is
person that
look,
is
if
asking
you are
is
if
always
you want
asking for free. Asking doesn't cost anything. In German, there is a saying: "Fragen kostet ja nichts." Asking doesn't cost anything.
exactly, but this is why I'm saying that the asking is free, but the actual technical costs are still there. So you're gonna have to tell them, look, if you want 2 more apples, this is the amount that you're gonna have to work for them, and this is the amount of pencils that you're going to have to give up. So then the person is going to have to take into consideration that cost, and
The
that is why
cost
it's
is
going
not
to
to them.
bring them
The
to the
cost is not
production
to them.
possibilities fund.
The cost is not to them because
The cost is the
it's not
cost
their
is to them
cost.
because it is the cost, because
No.
they know that if they have 2 more apples, they are not gonna be able to have 1 more pencil because it is beyond the
Yeah, but
production
we're
possibilities
saying
frontier.
no. We're saying within these bounds, they're still going to maximize their wants. We're not saying that they're asking for absurd things that are not possible, or we're not saying that they're asking for 100 apples and 100 pencils, even though this combination is not possible. That's not what I'm claiming. Obviously,
Okay?
I'm saying that within what's possible, they will always claim that they want the maximum that they can get away with, basically, without violating the constraints of what's possible on a
All right.
technical level. And that there is still a huge discrepancy between what they actually want, what they would be ready to pay for example, and what they write on this paper and what they vote for, right? What they want, if it's just a wish. Like, that's just so obvious. Like there will always be a discrepancy between what you wish and what you want, where you actually are willing to pay for it, right? Like, I
So what
want,
I'm saying is,
yeah,
look,
I don't want
what
a
I'm saying,
PlayStation 5. I don't have a PlayStation 5. I didn't buy a PlayStation 5 because I don't play that many games. But if I would get it for free, sure, why not?
yeah, but exactly that's the thing, okay? So within the production possibilities frontier, the people will give each of them will give a different point within the production possibilities frontier, right?
Uh-huh.
So then how do you know which point in the production possibilities frontier is going to be the optimal one in this?
Wait, what do
Well,
you
first
mean?
of all,
So you mean, wait, when you say point, what do you mean with point?
okay, so I mean, like, you can look it up, like, just look it up in Google, production possibilities frontier with a two model economy, with a two good economy, right? In a two good model.
Yeah.
It is a curve, right? It is a curve.
Mm-hmm.
There's two axes and there is a curve, right?
Mm-hmm.
So within that curve, there are some points that those are all of the
Wait, why is it a
feasible.
curve?
Sorry.
What is the y-axis plotting? What is the x-axis?
So the y-axis is one good, the x-axis is the other good.
Yes. Okay.
Right? That is the production possibilities frontier model.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
two goods,
Yeah.
and the curve represents the maximum amount that can be produced of every good of those two, all of the combinations that can be produced.
Each point is a possible combination on the
It is a combination
yeah.
that maximizes. Listen, it is a combination that maximizes the use of all of the factors of production. So you can
Yes.
produce below the curve, but you cannot produce above the curve, right?
To the
You can
left
only produce.
you can produce to the left and below.
You can only produce within the curve or below the curve, but not to the right of the curve.
Exactly. You can produce to the left and below.
Within. And
Yes.
within.
Yes.
Okay.
But that assumes that
So,
it's yeah. All right.
right.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
you will
Sure.
ask people, right? You will ask people, and they will give you different points in the curve, and some maybe will give you below the curve, right? Maybe the people that are not wanting too much of anything.
Wait. And now you've reintroduced the altruistic people.
No, but maybe.
No,
But
wait.
listen,
Okay.
listen, but not altruistically. They don't
Yeah,
want. They
okay.
don't want too much of anything just because they don't want to, because of the opportunity, because what you were saying earlier.
Negative externalities of goods.
Exactly, because
Okay.
of the
So you're
externalities.
relying on negative
But let's assume,
externalities.
okay, so this is stupid. Okay, so then let's just
Why
assume
is that
everybody's
stupid?
in the let's assume everybody, okay, it's gonna give you a point in the curve. It is stupid because it is
No, I believe
my
that
point
everyone is going
works
to give a point
because my argument is
on
going
the
to
curve.
work regardless.
No,
My argument is going to work regardless.
not everyone is. No, I think just theoretically, if we assume that everyone is rational and everyone is egoistic, if we assume that, then everyone is going to give a point on the curve, exactly
Yes,
on the
okay.
curve,
Yeah,
not
that is
below,
what I'm
not to
saying.
the left, exactly on
Yes,
the curve.
exactly, and that is why I'm saying that it is stupid because my point works regardless.
How does your point work regardless?
Why does it work regardless? Because
Yeah.
to all of those people, you're going to have to say, look, okay, these are all the combinations that, okay, we are going to have to produce the combination that leaves everybody content, right? And this is going to be a negotiation. So some will tell you, okay, so I'm willing to move a little bit upwards within the curve, all right, but this other thing needs to happen. I need, more on this and less on that. People will give you different things that they want to see happen in order for us to move to a point where all of them or most of them can be content so that the society can function, can exist. And this is why I think that the soft problem of socialism
Wait, let
can
me
be
think
solved.
about that. So you would basically create they would give points on the graph, right?
Yes.
And they would max them out. But that would still not, and they would always max them out.
Points. Yeah, so they will give points on the graph, but
Yeah.
only 1 point on the graph can be built, right? Can be done.
Yes.
Only 1 point.
Yes,
right?
and you would try to find an average.
Exactly, you would try to find an average where all of them are
where
more
the
or less
distance is closest to every point.
Exactly.
Yes, and now the question would be if that point, that would be a mathematical question, if that point would be actually closest to the actual demand that exists for that good, right? But it would still that kind of makes sense.
See, at that point, what the actual demand is worthless. It is an irrelevant position. It is something that is not meaningful. Why? Because at that point, if everybody's happy with what is, because it is close enough to their point for them to be content with it, then the question of what is the actual point, it's that, for all practical purposes, that is the point. That is the demand.
Yeah. Let me think about that.
And this is the soft problem,
Yeah.
right? It is not the hard problem, because the hard problem is whether that point will be fully welfare maximizing, right? And that is what I am not fully convinced. But whether it is possible to be done, I think it is possible to be done, and that would solve the soft problem of economic calculation.
Yeah, I guess the problem would be that there is not a finite. It's not a finite. There is not finite goods, right?
All of the
That would
goods
be
are
the
finite.
problem. So what do you mean?
All of the goods are finite, right? All
No,
of the
no, the
resources.
goods themselves are finite, but the variation of goods is not finite, right? So the variation of goods is not finite,
Yeah,
and
it is given by
also
it is given by the production possibilities frontier. So all of the possibilities are given by that frontier. It is a mathematical model. It can be done.
yes, but no, I mean no, yeah, but the mathematical model relies on that being only two goods, right? Like I
Yeah, but it can be
agree.
done.
Wait.
It,
I agree with you. You've convinced me that for this two good model,
uh-huh.
where the goods cost the same, we assume equal cost, right? Like we assume that we don't have the problem that we also have to uh find out the cost of the underlying.
No. I mean, the costs are not the same. The costs are going to be
No,
given
wait.
by the shape of the possibilities frontier, right? The shape
No.
of the possibilities frontier is going to give you the opportunity cost,
No.
right?
No. So the costs in the sense of production cost.
Yeah, those are given by the shape of the. So the opportunity cost is given by the shape
The
of
opportunity
the.
cost is given. Yeah, but that
Yes.
means that these are like you can okay, so you're saying that the resources don't have to be the same, but so
All
you're
the resources
saying,
that
yeah.
the society has are fully expended at that, right? So if the society has 10 workers working with uh let's say 10 tools, whatever the tools are, like, are given, right? In the model.
Mm-hmm.
The model just tells you the all of the possible combinations that can be produced, expending to the maximum those given resources. And the resources are given, right? Whenever you are planning for something, the resources are given to you, right? You have this amount of workers, this amount of water, this amount of land, this amount of whatever, right?
Yeah,
Those
yeah,
are
yeah, but
given.
it assumes that these are the same for these two things, right? So
No, it doesn't, because
I
again,
mean, if it's
because one thing is gonna be one thing is gonna require more of those resources, right? So that's gonna be mean that the more you produce of that, the less you can produce of the other.
wait, can you give me a moment? I have to go to the bathroom real quick.
Yeah, sure.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So,
Uh,
I didn't realize that so much time has gone
I
by.
know, I know, I know. Yeah, you have to go
So,
probably, right?
yeah, I will have to go soon, but we can try to finish what we were discussing and make some kind of a summary.
Wait, you're cutting off like really bad right now. You've been like
Yeah.
2 seconds or something was gone. But I think you were saying that we can like make some final summary, right?
Yeah.
I think you made a really good point at the end. I will think about this point where the cost would be basically to give a point on that curve. I will definitely look into it. I mean, the problem that the only problem that I would see with it is that you have basically 2 dimensions in our example, but
Yep.
in the reality, in the real example, you would have infinite dimensions, right? Because there's infinite amount of goods.
Exactly.
Not each good,
There would
not
be,
each good is finite, but the amount of variety in goods is infinite, right?
yeah. So this is the thing: is that the actual thing can be done. It is obviously going to require a lot of computational effort and require a lot of simultaneous equations, but it can
I
be
would be
done, right?
fine with that.
And see, like this is one of the things
Yeah.
that when I was studying microeconomics in college, right, I had this professor who was presenting to us the models of utility maximization of neoclassical economics, right? And when you learn them at an undergraduate level, you do very simple maximization where you have one or two goods, right? You have economies with one or two, and that is the maximization that you do. And there are obviously many students that give that exact same question, right? And that exact same critique to the model, right? Which is, well, but if you do this with many modes, this model wouldn't work. And this professor said, well, this will absolutely work.
In
The
finite
problem is just
dimensionally, it will absolutely work.
exactly, and that is the thing, is that this does work mathematically, it can work, and theoretically it does work. Now in practice it's going to be very difficult,
I'm
and
not
that is why I
bothered by
say
that.
that,
Yeah, that
and
doesn't
that is
bother
why
me.
and that is why many like socialist economists who work on this question, their task is to say how this can work, right? And exactly what the computations would need to be, etc. And they have proposed solutions, and they are viable solutions. Why I'm saying that these are all viable solutions,
Hmm. I
and
mean,
and, and they can be done. But it is obviously going to be very complicated,
yeah.
and we
So
don't currently have the political or social or economic will to be able to do this at a generalized level throughout the world. That is why this is done on a very localized level and on what are also market economies, right? So China, for example, the Chinese Communist Party does economic plans, but at the same time they do rely on the market economic structure of their society, right?
yes, yes.
So again, so this is why I don't say that this can be done today, but there are proposals for it to be done, and there we can certainly attain enough social, economic, and political will to be able to do this, because the mathematical constraints are not too hard
Uh,
to be with our current level of technology.
okay, let me be specific. I'm not bothered at all by it being extremely complicated or it being infinite dimensional as long as it works. Like if it works, that will be fine. Like let me just give you a quick perspective. I think the last argument that you made is a really good one. I will look into it. Like I would really like to look at the mathematics of it, how it would look like, and if I'm still convinced after looking at the mathematics. But I think it's a you have, I think, from first sight, I think you have successfully introduced a cost, like this cost of voting for something. I think that might be solved with that. but I'm not sure yet. I would have to look into it more. And the second thing that I would like to look at is in terms of people getting what they actually want. I think that there is, like you've said, that there is no the underlying what they actually value, the actual value, or what they actually want doesn't matter anymore. I'm not convinced on that front yet either. I'm not sure which one represents more what people actually want, in which system that is basically built better, like with the where we choose a point, or if it's the market system, which one is better at that. And I think there might be a mathematical solution for that as well, I think, but I'm not sure. I would have to look into it. But I think it was a really great conversation.
Yeah, it was productive. You
Yeah.
definitely made me talk about things that I usually do not talk about, because as I said at the beginning of the conversation, I am mostly an analytical person. So I like to work on models, try to describe the way that the economy currently works and all of the social phenomena that emanate from these economic workings. And I tend to be more of a, descriptive guy, not that much of a prescriptive guy. But I definitely think that it is valuable to be able to make predictions, although they need to be based on descriptions, right, of the problems and of how things actually work. So figuring out certain things on this on prescriptive issues is definitely something that I want on more in the future, and you have certainly given, and we have had a heated for moments but a productive conversation.
I think so too,
from what
man.
I can tell.
Thanks for being on. Tomorrow I'll have another conversation. Tomorrow the stream is going to be not so pleasant, I guess, or maybe very pleasant, depending on how it goes. It's going to be about race realism. Yeah,
Wow.
let's see how that one goes. But the guy that does it, I think, is a good faith guy as well, and it's going to be probably interesting. Let's see.
Yeah, no, and totally, like, you are a really good faith guy, and you are certainly a smart guy.
Thank
And
you,
you
man.
certainly have a critical and an open mind, which is something that I value a lot, and it is what I'm looking for when I have a conversation with someone, right? So even if I have been a little harsh sometimes,
Not at all.
and maybe a little bit pedantic some other times, I absolutely value intelligence and what you have brought into this conversation, and I hope to talk to you more in the future.
Definitely, I will look into it, and at some point, I think I'll reschedule something if I have more disagreement. If I don't reach out, then you can assume that I've accepted your arguments, and even the better.
At least let me know. At least let me know.
I will.
Right?
I'll write you. I'll write you. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
Then have a good one. Bye bye.
yeah. Have a good one, and good luck for your conversation.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
That was really a cool conversation. Yeah, as I've said, tomorrow stream on race realism with Bo Weingart, and I think it's going to be a very good conversation as well. Yeah, that's it. All right. Have a good night.